Black African power. What's good? What's happening? A well-organized lie. Defeats a disorganized truth. Every time. Woo-hoo-wee, man. Y'all already know what it is, man. It's the pseudo killers on deck. And we come to do what we got to do, and we're going to do what we got to do. We standing tall, standing strong. Hey, man, y'all know what it is, man. It's God killing the house, man. And the pseudo killers is here, man. We got a real special interview today. All right. Dr. Aiden, man, he on his A game, and you know we appreciate him the most, man. We're in the trenches making sure the way is cleared so the brother can do his thing, man. He went and got his PhD, and he used it for the greater of our community, man. And we appreciate that. Hey, Juju, what's good? What it do? What it do? What it do? Pseudo Killer Official.
Thank you. I'm fantastic.
Looking marvelous. Looking marvelous as usual. Brown and marvelous, for sure.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Aiden. I'm sorry.
Yeah, read his bio, and then I'm gonna hit that music after you read that bio, and it's gonna get us up for it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let me introduce Dr. John Aiden, who holds a PhD. He is a distinguished social historian and visionary educational leader whose career is anchored by deep expertise in African history and a decorated record of prestigious fellowships. Holding a doctorate from Indiana University, Bloomington in 2003, Dr. Aiden's teachings and scholarship is profoundly informed by his tenure as a Fulbright dissertation field research fellow in the Republic of Mali and his recognition as a 3-time U.S. Department of Education Foreign Area Language Studies Fellow, which facilitated his fluency in Bamana. If I'm saying that correctly, you can correct me if you want. In Bamana. Yeah. His extensive academic credentials include serving as Committee on Institutional Cooperation, the CIC, Minority Graduate Fellow, an Asian Studies Development Program Fellow at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. We know that one. And Beijing University, China, Field Seminar Fellow. In addition to being a Summer Research Opportunity Program Fellow at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park at the Oriental Institute Museum. Beyond his research on the historical power dynamics of West Africa, Dr. Aiden has translated this rigorous background into impactful executive leadership, previously serving as the executive director of the African American Historical Society and Museum, and as leader in independent school diversity and belonging, space at elite independent schools. Thank you, Dr. Aiden.
All right. Hey, Space Age Anthony, Pseudo Killer Official, where you at? What it do? What it do?
Yo, peace, bro. Peace to everybody.
Yeah,
man. I'm here
all
to
right.
learn.
Checking in on you. Kyle, what's good? What it do? Pseudo Killer Army, man, what's up? Kyle, what it do?
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Shout out to the professor coming through Indiana University. That's why my ears perked up on that one.
Yeah, you perked. What's up? What it do? All right. Mel, what it do? What it do? Pseudo Killer Army all day. What it do?
Yeah.
What it do?
What it do? What it do? Shout out to Dr. Aiden. Have him on the panel. This is gonna be a good one.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one. I ain't gonna let him go too far, man. He might beat me up. I'm gonna stay right in the sweet spot. I'm not arguing with this man tonight.
Right.
On this show. I'm not doing it. I'm not. Oh, here we go. Hey, man, you know we get this going. It's gonna get us into the mode. Let's go.
Protected by the Black Widow. Protected by the Black Widow. Good juju. Bad juju. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. I speak loud on the mic. knowledge to the people. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. Where the fuck you been? Bomb little niggas again. We buck the trend. It's been a trend. Pull desert. Eagles again. Never say this line again. Never sipping Heineken. Black Panther riding again. Always on my mind to win. I'm where I'm supposed to been. Black Widow protect me. Feds lose again. Nigga, cheat to win. Dope fiend never win. I speak loud on the mic. Knowledge to the people. Protect the youngsters. We pull desert eagles. Never say this line again. Never sipping Heineken is where I win. Black Panther riding again. When naggers break wild, no slack. I'm cutting like an axe. Kick though can't cut in the tracks. Good juju. Bad juju. Never been in a gang but stay crewed up. We answer beepers, can't be tracked, computer hacked. Protect the weaker, don't wear tattoos. But if I did, it be the reaper. Never say this line again. Let truth be where we begin. Christians talking reckless, claiming we born in sin. Capping, let us begin. Pseudo killers to the rescue again. Never tripping, we teaching STEM. Forces those tripping. Choose again to the pseudos. It's always grim, we play to win. God killer again. Always time to defend. Bet the trend. King souls to the king. If I can't chill and be Kent. Malcolm Finch, those niggas for the win. TED Talk, bitch walk. Fans time enough for them youngins. Space age, Africans. Anthony with the space. And yeah, jump, we smacking them.
Oh, man. Y'all know what it is, man. Here we go, man. We in the thing, man. I see Cedric is here now. What's going on, Cedric? What it do? What it do? You running late, man. What it do? Quick in and out. What's good, Cedric? How you doing, man?
I'm good. Been working all day. I'm looking forward to this, and depends on how late we go. You might see me later on tonight again.
All right, man. Okay. Hey, Sean P, man. Mossy Clan Warrior, man. What's good with you, man? What it do? What it do? What it do?
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with everybody today, man. Appreciate you having me. Shout out to everybody.
Yeah, man. So listen, Mr. John is very, very educated on a lot of daggone subjects. So I'm going to keep rails on the daggone conversation because we going to have him back for a few different shows. He has expertise in the slave trade. I heard some very interesting thing. Metallurgy. I know y'all want to hear that. That'll drag us into the long, drag out fight about science, which we're not going to do today at all. We're going to not get on that. He's kicking up dust right now, and he's kicking up dust on the subject of, I would say, Ivan Van Sertima, and then it drags us into the Dr. Ben, the John Henry Clarks, and all the black writers. Hey, so Sean, hold on, wait. I want to do this for you, Juju. I want you to read this. Hold on, I'm gonna send this to you. I want you to read this, and it's gonna take us right into the conversation. So I already know we're gonna rank Diops at the top. Is that right, Dr. Aiden? We're gonna put Diops at the top. That's what you put him at.
I put Dr. John Henry Clark and Diop neck and neck.
Neck and necky?
I put them neck and neck. Yeah. They're from slightly different eras and obviously regions. So they was doing some very powerful things at the same time. So,
All right. Okay, I'm gonna put Diops a tick ahead of him, right? Just a tick, right? I wanna cheat and put Clark there because he's African American, but I'm saying this gonna be a serious conversation, man. We're gonna get into what they did and how they did it. You got the thing, Juju?
Yeah, I have it.
Read that. That's gonna kick the conversation off, and then we're gonna get into Ivan. Read that. That's gonna put us right into the conversation. This is essential. This statement right here.
Okay, let me blow it up. There it goes. So, Shikenta Diop. He says, I would like to see above all greater number of researchers, Afro-Americans, young Americans, and even whites. Why not? Because it's the young who are the least prejudiced. As a consequence, they are the most capable of making triumph ideals which frighten the older generation. Also, I think that it will be necessary to put together polyvalent scientific teams capable of doing in-depth studies for sure. And that's what's important. It bothers me when someone takes me on my word without developing a means of verifying what I say. We must form a scientific spirit capable of seeing even the weaknesses of our own proofs, of seeing the unfinished side of our work, and of committing ourselves to completing it. You understand? Therefore, we should then have a work which could honestly stand criticism, because what we've done would have been placed on a scientific plane.
Yeah, that's for me, you know, I understood at that point that it's okay to critique the elders. And it's also okay to break away from old ideas. And that's what we sit at. So, Dr. Aiden, man, what do you think about that statement? And let's talk about, Dios for a second.
I mean, it's powerful. I think I'm going to take it back. So I did a lot of my field work in the Republic of Mali. I lived and worked there I traveled there 6 times. I lived there for 3.5 years off and on. And in Ségou, which is a town outside of the capital city of Bamako, maybe 90 minutes, a little bit longer than that away from the capital city, there's this administrative town that the French chose as one of their sites to dominate the region. This was in the 1850s. Well, long before that, there was a figure named Biton Coulibaly. Biton Coulibaly was, it's going to sound like a tangent, but he was a young enslaved African man in Ségou, in the Ségou kingdom, and he went to the elders and asked if they would give him permission to marry. And they said no. Now, Biton was a member of the Tonjon. Tonjon in Bamana is a word that means the association of slaves. I'm going to just put the term, it's a union of enslaved persons. And so when the elders told him no, he kept going back. They kept saying no. He armed the other members of his Ton, men and women, and they started raiding the caravans coming out of the Sahara into the Ségou kingdom, into the Ségou area, and they destabilized it. And then he founds the Ségou kingdom. So in Bamako, in Mali today, if a child checks an elder, the elders will say, you can become Biton Coulibaly too. What am I saying? Within the internal logic of West Africa, and at least in Mande cultures, is this idea that age and gerontocracy are not just strictly to be respected just on ceremony, and that youth can overthrow elders if the elders are not standing in truth. And on top of that, you got the griots coming, from another perspective in Mande culture and say, hey, if the story's not accurate, it's been mistold. And if it's been mistold, it needs to be rectified. So for me, like, Shekanta Diop is coming out of that framework in West Africa, where youth are not just to be downtrodden by elders, right? It's a conversation. It's a dialogical conversation across generations. And I think that, I appreciate the words. I mean, obviously he was speaking in the language of science because he studied nuclear science, right? And he was operating at a time before, like, the social scientific method was just coming into existence. It hadn't, like, been fully fleshed out. And in the French speaking world, it was emerging differently than in the Anglophone speaking world, right? So he used the term science, but today we would refer to what he was doing as social science. Now, the thing that I love about that quote is him talking about a polyvalent team, a team with multiple valences. Your chemistry, chemical compounds, elements have valences. So what he was referring to was interdisciplinarity. That's how we talk about it in the academy today. And for me, my journey, I can tell you a little bit about my journey, but as an academic, I had to learn a little bit of sociocultural anthropology. I know comparative political, political economy. I also know sociocultural history, right? These are all different frameworks. My minor inside grad school, my outside minor, I'll tell you about that in a second. My outside minor was African art history. When I went to the University of Graduate School, my first year, and I'm dating myself now, 1992, I talked to my thesis advisor. He was like, yeah, you need to get over to the University Graduate School and tell them what your major and your minor is going to be. So I go over there, special building. All they do is just register graduate students for, their designations. And so I told them I was doing history with a focus on Africa, and China was going to be my second field within the field of history. And the registrar said, don't you want to do African-American studies for your minor? And I was like, do I have to? And she was like, no, you don't have to. I was like, okay, so China is what it is then. And then what's your outside minor? My outside minor was African art history. So for me, when you're going through grad school, you have to figure out what your pathway is through the institution. And I'll tell you that in many ways, I believe everything happens for a reason, but I also believe in fortuitous accidents, right? And I signed up my first year in grad school for a sociocultural anthropology of Africa course. I'm in there kicking it, reading all the, ethnographers, early anthropologists who had problems, right? There were problems with sociocultural anthropology. And in week 4, the professor, Dr. Paula Ben Amos, Gershik was her name. She was like, you're not supposed to be in here. And I was like, I'm not. And I was like, do I have to disenroll? She was like, no, it's too late for you to disenroll. I'm the only historian at Indiana University in the entire history of the history or sociocultural anthropology departments who has ever taken the sociocultural anthropology course. So I learned things about the fieldwork methodology and all the problems that it have that none of my colleagues got to learn in grad school, right? So that was a body of knowledge that made me interdisciplinary just by definition, but just listening to the different fields that I'm a part of, like you had to learn about different fields in order to be conversant. And that's one thing that, I would say Sheikh Anta Diop injected into the academy, not just the study of African history. He forced the general academy, which was dominated by white scholars, but not exclusively, right? He forced them to adopt interdisciplinarity because his methodologies were profound. Now, they weren't all accurate by today's standards.
Correct.
Like, for instance, he drew a lot of surface level comparisons between ancient Kemetic language and the Wolof language because he's Senegalese. He knew Wolof, right? Well, this was before the rise of modern computational linguistics, which allows us to compare aspects of linguistics, morphemes, graphemes, but also how language changes over time. There are also global information systems, GIS systems that can help modern linguists map ancient languages as they moved across physical geographic space. He didn't have access to any of those tools. And on top of that, in the 60s, all the scholars and the vast majority of the Afrocentric intellectuals were using E.A. Wallace Budge as a standard, his dictionaries of ancient Egyptian. But we know today that, like, based on modern computational linguistics, there were some errors in interpretation that he made. So if they're using him as their standard, right, then that creates problems downstream.
Mhm.
Sometimes
Right.
when I talk to black people about that, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to hear that. Diop was right, period." You know, and I'm like, okay, I'm always gentle with it because you know I could run them down, but like I'm not at the stature of that man. And I
Right.
think it's important to just state that. Like, I always come to this work through humility.
Mm.
As a lifelong learner, I know I don't know it all. I know I'm just pursuing greater knowledge
Mhm.
over the course of one's life. So Diop interjected, like I know you. I can tone it down, but Diop interjected interdisciplinarity into the academy writ large. Like all those Egyptologists, and they weren't all white. Some of them were Arab. I mean, let me back up to real quick. In order to do Egyptology effectively, you need to have a knowledge of Middle Egyptian language.
Mhm.
This is back then in the day. Let's say even in the 1920s.
Mhm.
A classically trained scholar like Martin Bernal, who wrote Black Athena, was a classically trained polyglot.
Mhm.
He knew Greek, ancient Greek. He knew Hebrew. He also had to know hieroglyphics. And then on top of that, and of course, he used Budge as well, right? As his dictionary source. But then he also had at some point to learn Middle Egyptian. That's 4 languages. I'm not done. You also had to know Latin. You also had to know some Arabic, because where are these collections located? Who's writing the metadata inside these museums about the pieces that are on public display and the pieces that are not on public display? So, you know, and you have a number of languages that you have to learn. And then just within the ancient Egyptian or Kemetic languages, you also had to learn hieratic and demotic. Look,
Mhm.
you're talking about 9 or 10 languages that you have to know, and you can count the number of people who do that on 2 hands in the world. Right now, there weren't language certification programs in 1920. People just picked it up. They picked up the dictionary, they started learning. Right? So I started learning Middle Egyptian hieroglyphics when I was at the University of Chicago as a rising senior in undergrad. In 1991. I lived in Hyde Park for 8 weeks. And I got over to the Third World Bookstore, of course, Third World Press.
Mhm.
You know, I was right there. You next to Moss Miriam, all those pieces of like classic Black culture on the South Side of Chicago. But those language pieces are like Egyptologists of all the people in the ancient world, like the Egyptologists and the people who studied ancient Greece, they were as close to interdisciplinary as you get for most of the 20th century. But as the 20th century wears on, like some things happen. One thing that happens is that, like, so, you know, a lot of Sertima wrote 1976,
Mhm.
you know, and there were other scholars writing at the same time. Dr. Asa Hilliard III, who I had the pleasure of meeting twice. You know, these people were writing in a window, but in that window, some things were happening in the academy. And I'm working on a 3-volume book series about this topic. So when
I
it's
know
done,
you is. I know
yeah.
you is. So all right. So we got Diop's, and I think I don't want nobody to gloss over him at that Cairo symposium coming with interdisciplinary studies. So he is definitely one of, I don't want to overrule, but he's definitely one of the ones that actually pushed that, right? So we're going to stand on that pillar. Also, he pushed for the Egyptians being indigenous Africans, okay? And he threw in the Negro black. They brushed that out of there because there's no way to really, you can't really compute that, whether a person is black. That's crazy. Anybody could be black at that point. So proper, they got that out of there and say they're indigenous Africans, right? And they would
Yeah.
range in skin color and phenotype. So that's proper par for the course. And so that indigenous Africanness is like for the first time that somebody actually forced them to change their stance. And I think with those 2 items right there, that's the greatest accomplishment that anybody that looked like us could have did to push academia in that position. Prior to that, they was all in the Middle East trying to study Middle Eastern cultures and all that, and they wasn't studying African cultures, so it forced them to study African cultures. Agree or disagree to that?
Yeah, agree. I mean, that's broadly accepted across the field of African studies, and especially within Africanist history and historiography. That's broadly accepted by scholars today. And it was a sea change. The other thing that he did, which was subtle, well, it wasn't subtle. I take that back. He basically argued that there was an ancient model, and this is something that Martin Bernal would pick up on in Black Athena, that there was a way that Europeans began systematically erasing ancient Kemet, and I'll just use Egypt as a term because I'm comfortable with that, and it's an Egyptian term that the Greeks mispronounced, right? But that's a whole separate issue. But
right, correct. I'm
introduced this idea of the ancient model as an active knowledge project of propaganda that the Europeans were engaged in to locate ancient Egypt in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean. Now you look at a map of Egypt, you see how far down the Nile Abydos is. That ain't no Mediterranean civilization. When I think Mediterranean, I'm like, that joint's on the coast. That joint on the coast, they gotta go down the Nile for miles and miles. Look, I got bars tonight. So I'm just like, yo, come on. But I want to be careful in saying that, and this is where Brother Ngozi lights it up. We got to talk, we need to know about the Natufians. We need to recognize that the ancient Mediterranean world, let's include Kemet in Egypt in that for a minute, and Sudan and Nubia. Like the ancient, that's really going deep to the south though. But the ancient Mediterranean world was a world where people borrowed from one another. And I'm kind of, maybe I don't know how y'all feel about it, but maybe I'm a little bit of a different cat on this tip, because borrowing is what your Homo sapiens do. Since the Blombos cave in South Africa, the first art kit, we know was used to probably paint bodies and also structures with symbolic meaning, like Homo sapiens share. And it's so wild because when I'm in these social media spaces, sometimes people are like, we need to gatekeep our culture. I'm like, good luck with that. That ain't working. How's that working out for you? That's not working. Look, Black culture is all over the world. It's all over the world. What you know what? I'm gonna mess it up now. You got Korean bands that's doing, Michael Jackson dance moves. Like, what are we doing here? This culture is universal. It's everywhere. You got Japanese choirs singing gospel music. It's universal. Like, so you cannot gatekeep culture. And when you try, you're gonna fail. So, like when you look now, this is where I'll mention Dr. Ben here for a minute.
Slow down. No, I'm gonna slow you down.
Okay, I know you was.
I'm gonna hold up these books right now. Juju and Sean P. They beats the brakes off the pretendians. So they're gonna segue you into the real reason you hear Ivan Van Sertima.
Okay, let's go.
They're gonna handle the heavy lifting on that, right? But I want to get this out of the way because I feel like we're at the point where science was gonna get fully formed. They had to break away from the philosophical, right? The Greek authority, the natural philosophers. Let me say that the natural philosophers. You got natural philosophers in Egypt, and you got natural philosophers in Greece and different places like that. So they was breaking away from that, and they was putting authority on the actual quote unquote phenomenon. And they was breaking away. So I feel like with you on your move right now, this is the perfect time to do that break. Right now, that break doesn't mean you disrespecting, doesn't mean you don't hold the high regard, but we know there's more work to do. So I'm gonna do this, bam. Right? This the joke. This is my, I'm saying this is my foundation. This is what I stand on this, right? So I want to dive at you first, talk a little bit about Black Man in the Nile and his family and the great Dr. Ben. That's my man. So take it easy on him. This is my man.
I mean,
you, don't mess it up.
You put me on the vice grips on day one.
I got a head. I mean, why have a PhD and study as much as you've studied interdisciplinary if you can't speak on it?
Well, I'll just say,
gloves off till he goes out dry. Aiden, don't listen to Bobby.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
right,
yeah. I'm
I
just
got
joking. I'm just you take it back.
I got you. I mean, look, I will. Let me just preface this by saying I'm in Northeast Ohio, and all my books are in Cali. So just keep that in mind. So it's not like I'm reviewing this stuff instantly the day before we came on here, but I'll just
No,
say
not
more
extra. I just
generally
want to hear
that
about.
when we look at Dr. Ben, well, I'm gonna talk about his ideas before his credentials because I think
Okay.
that's important to just
Okay.
respect the ideas and not make it a personal thing because people read that the wrong way. But he relied exclusively on E.A. Wallace Budge's dictionaries. That's problem A, right? So it creates a challenge. The other thing that he did, he was an exclusivist. So he argued that ancient Egypt was exclusively black. We know, I was starting to say this a minute ago, and you cut my wisdom.
Yeah, you
But
know, throw it in there. I know you was gonna throw it in there.
not really. I'm playing with you, but for real, ancient Egypt is at the confluence of 3 continents:
Correct.
Asia and Asia Minor, Southern Europe, and Africa. So this is and you add in the Natufians, backward migration, which we're learning more about from the genetics. Like, this was a super highway of culture. We know the Persians, and people in ancient Mesopotamia built roads. We know that lapis lazuli, which is used in ancient Kemetic and Egyptian art, like the blazing blue mineral that's found in King Tutankhamun's tomb, like that's from Afghanistan. It's not indigenous to Africa. So these cultures were so powerful, they were magnets and they were pulling people in from all around the surrounding area. And so it comes back to that borrowing piece, which I was kind of setting up, before. That borrowing piece is important. And so for, Dr. Ben to be an exclusivist creates problems with trying to understand how many people are coming into and exiting ancient Egypt, right? And there's reasons they're there. They might be there for politics and statecraft. We know that the ancient Egyptians struggled mightily with the Hittites and the Assyrians. They could not defeat, some of their military tactics, and it limited how much of an expansionist power ancient Egypt could become because they could only go into the Levant so far, and they'd hit these groups that, and so those are all things to think about. Now, when we think about Dr. Ben today, too, I'll say 2 other things. One, he clearly took a male chauvinist approach to ancient Egypt, which is a whole separate ball of wax. But we know that women played huge roles in political and economic context in ancient Kemet. So he missed that in a way, but he also surfaced some of these important women, Queen T, for instance, and there's a few others, that he actually he gave name to. So that's something to just consider. Like our ideas about gender and masculinity and femininity in ancient African societies have changed a lot since he was publishing. The last thing I'll say is that, oh man, his footnotes are so jacked up. His footnotes are so jacked
Oh wow.
But now I want to say this. And this is for everyone in this class that we're talking about. It's not like it's a course, but I mean, this class of scholars that we're talking about. All of them in this time period didn't have access to the internet.
Correct.
The human genome had not been cracked yet.
Correct.
There were no such thing as haplogroups. Right. I mean, I just going down the list, like, to be fair to these people. And the other piece is they had to travel thousands of miles to access physical copies in colonial archives. This is what makes Sheikh Anta Diop so incredible. He had to travel thousands of miles to just compare one set of cognates in ancient Egyptian to Wolof, where he needed to go talk to people who had deeper knowledge than he had, right? Or other languages. So the sheer physicality of travel limited what they could know. And I think it's important to just like, I don't hear anybody talking about that. And this is a part of the book where I'm breaking down, like, I want to be fair to them to the extent possible. And still, like, how can we grow beyond what they knew, what they asserted, or where, you know, they extended flaws. So like when I laugh because you was laughing when I said his footnotes are jacked up.
Because I know you.
What is, there's a reason why. Right? There's a reason why. So I think it's important to just kind of keep that in mind. Like today, we have this supercomputer in our back pockets that rings when people call us. It's got more computing in it than all the computing that's ever existed on Earth in human history until right this moment. We can get answers from that device if you know how to use it and you have critical thinking skills and you learn discernment. I'm going to use my church word. I got that out the way. That's off the list. And you know, it's just something that we totally take for granted. I know I was on a YouTube video a couple days ago, and people in the comments were like, computing has nothing to do with what these people are arguing. I'm like, no, you're wrong. Because a computer can allow us to compare data sets across geographic space and time, across the space-time continuum, in a way human beings had never been able to do before. And so when we look at Dr. Ben, when he's thinking about the Black man of the Nile and his family, like first he's using a language of possession, but this was all the language that was used in the 60s and the 70s and in the Black Power movement, right? So I won't want it to come out the wrong way by saying I cut him some slack, but I hope the chat understands what I mean when I say that. Not like I'm looking down on them or I'm better than them, or that's not how I'm saying it.
Well, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, because we standing here on Mount Olympus and the air is real thin there. It's very, very thin. So don't worry about that. They're going to say that anyway because you over here. So don't worry about it. All right. They're going to already say what you didn't say and make the mistake and mess up with what you did say. Here you go. John Jackson.
I mean, you know, look, I think these texts, and there's another one we could probably put in a slightly similar category, which is John and Beatty's traditional African philosophy and religion. Like these texts are important because they start framing religion as a social practice that informed the knowledge bases of the worlds those people came from. Right. So I mean, these books are important, and BT is seen as the standard, like entry into whether Africans had traditional philosophy or not. And I should really back up and say, in the colonial period, there were a lot of claims that Europeans made that were race-based assumptions about what African people and their descendants could not do. It was a deficit model. So Europeans and white American scholars did not believe Africans had the capacity intellectually to create philosophy. Right. They also, I mean, when I was at Indiana University, one of the important scholars I met was this white guy named Roy Sieber. Roy Sieber looked like Santa Claus, big, huge white afro. In 1950, he wrote the first PhD thesis on African art in an art history program. There were no African art history programs. He founded them. And he was really an accident in a way, but he was just looking at all of the material culture of African everyday life and how beautiful it was. And he was like, Africans created art. The whole academy shouted him down. All these scholars came out the wood. They were like, Africans they're incapable of creating art. Their brains don't function in the abstract. How you going to do brass casting if you can't think in the abstract? Right? How you going to carve masks from the inverse if you can't think in the abstract? The mask itself is a tool of social control. How is that not an abstraction? Right? So when he published his thesis, they all shouted him down. Well, he ended up, attracting more than 300 students. And many of them were white Americans because the academy was deeply segregated until Brown versus Board of Education. Then black people had to get bachelor's degrees, and then the graduate research academy was still not really open to a lot of African American scholars. Not everybody. Like, of course, you got like Du Bois deep in black time in the 20th century, but for the most part, like, there's just not a lot of people doing that. And I want to circle back around. I mean, Sieber's dope. He's dope. A lot of his students are personal friends of mine, and they're curators of African art museums. University of Iowa, a good friend of mine, Mary Jo Arnaldi, who did work on puppetry in Mali and the carving of puppets. She ran the Smithsonian Institution's African Art Museum. She was the curator. Now, over time, it became more problematic for white scholars to be leading those institutions when you have Africans from the continent who are just as capable of leading those institutions, or African Americans, right? But I'll just say, like, knowledge is for everybody. So, on one level, anybody can get it. But what's powerful about, African religion is just the way that it was fused into everyday life. I'm just going to say that, it took time for people to appreciate this connection between ethnicity and race and skin color in African societies, because in some African societies, like, the term black is an indigenous term. It signals love, great beauty. But in other instances, and even sometimes in the same society, it signals profundity of knowledge, a depth of experience, the unknowable. In Southern Africa, there's proverbs about, you may you be as black as the cattle who's your best friend. Right. So in these cases, blackness doesn't map one-to-one onto our modern ideas about race, especially global northern ideas about race. Sometimes blackness is a religious term, right? And it's signaling religious identities and spiritual identities, and not one that's tied up with, it might have been connected to skin color, but in some societies even it wasn't. So, like, it's just complex. And so when scholars begin exploring African religion and philosophy, they're facing huge headwinds, because a lot of people are like, yeah, black people didn't have religion, they didn't have philosophy. Now, that's not even it's seen as a racist question to even ask. It's a white supremacist question to pose.
All right, so we did the John Jackson. So that's all you want to say about John Jackson?
For now, yes.
Now, all right, here you go. That's my favorite right here.
Ooh, oh, wow, not another favorite. Look at the dog ears. He got the notes in the book. I can see it from here.
I read that. I used to read it once a year. Now I read it once every 2-3 years now, because I know it's out of date, man. I know, man. But go ahead.
I mean, Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization it's at once a classic and a work with challenges. Like, he visited 25 African countries in preparation for the work. What's unique about it is it's the first kind of continent-wide survey of Black Africa, and that distinguished him in some ways from some of the other Afrocentric intellectuals, because many were focused on Kemet and Egypt, kind of heavily so. But what's interesting about Destruction of Black Civilization is it's a deficit argument that he's making. He's like, why did our ancestors end up so dispossessed, right, by the global North or the modern West? And he's in search of formulae that will help explicate why that happened. Now, in the process, he essentializes some African cultures and historical experiences, meaning he whittles them down so much that what we would call today, as we would say, he flattened those experiences, because there wasn't a level of nuance. And also because he was traveling as much as he did, then it was hard for him to get to the level of depth that would have been more productive. And I need to say this because it's super important. While these scholars are writing, oral history has already emerged as a discipline, and it's got technical components to it. The first PhD thesis, what was a PhD thesis, but the first book on oral history as tradition was authored by Professor Jan van Sina, who was Belgian, I believe. He worked at the University of Wisconsin at Madison in their African Studies program. He co-stood that program up with Philip Curtin, who's deeply problematic in some ways, but also he was a master scholar of Africa at the same time. Now, I'm going to say, Curtin is the one who stood up at the 1969 African Studies Association and complained bitterly that history jobs were going to Black scholars who were underqualified while white scholars were not being hired. So he made a sort of reverse discrimination argument. And the Bakke decision on reverse discrimination had just happened. And it was John Henry Clark. Dr. Clark in that meeting was stood up and shouting match. Right. And so that led to the founding of the AHSA. I think I got that right, but it's like the African Heritage Studies Association. And so this was largely Black scholars who broke away from the African Studies Association, and they did it. It's all in my book. They did it at the same time, like Patrice Lumumba had been assassinated like a few years prior. And so African Studies departments, one of the complaints that Dr. Clark, this is why Dr. Clark's on my level. Dr. Clark was like, we should be here to study African people's past from African and African studies is not just history. It's like political science, economics, like all of it. So we should be studying Africa's historical experience from African-centered perspectives, not here as a handmaiden of the U.S. intelligence services and the U.S. military, because the U.S. intelligence services had supported all of the machinations that led to African leaders being murdered, right? And so, and this is, we take this for granted, like those assassinations are well known. But my point is that Dr. Clark, not only did he stand up, and like, I just want to back up and pause for a second.
Okay.
Philip Curtin wrote African History from Earliest Times to Independence. It's a classic. This book's amazing, right? And so I almost feel like I'm in an R. Kelly time tunnel, wormhole, because I'm trying to separate the music from the man. Like, this is Curtin. He stood up and he said this racist stuff, right, at this meeting, but his work is incredible. Now, here's what I want to put. The backup piece is I want to put a gloss on this. Curtin was so powerful. He personally minted 75 PhDs in tropical history, African history. That meant he was on the committees of those people. And he said, when he stood up at the African Studies Association and he said, these Black scholars are getting hired and they're not qualified, he was directly challenging the qualifications of the white scholars who had chosen to train Black scholars in African history. And then to add insult to injury, I mean, this man was inordinately powerful. He said in his comments, I conducted a personal survey informally, and half of the scholars I called who are on committees evaluating candidates for tenure track jobs in African history, half of them are slotted to go to Black scholars. Now, when you're as powerful as him, his textbook was just out.
He froze. Juju.
Give him a minute.
So he was trying to get into it.
Got him. Yeah, he was cooking, man.
Get him. Somebody kill the internet. Hey, Sean, you remember that?
That's funny.
Put a plug on the internet.
Put a plug on the internet. Con Calloway.
Yeah.
I didn't know he froze. Let's see. Con Calloway. That's what he was.
Con Calloway facts. Super calm.
I didn't know he froze. I hope he ain't think he's still talking. Hold on. Go ahead, Juju. Fill that air real quick. I'm calling.
Sean or Mel can fill it in.
Sean, fill it in, Sean.
I mean, what he's saying so far in the direction he's going, and people might be lost, is that he's giving his explanation about the work.
All right, dude.
Yeah, I'm back. I think I'm back.
All right, you back. You start getting too deep. They got you out of here. The pseudos found a way to hack it. Right? You know how the pseudos do. Respectfully. All right, you remember that?
I mean, I just want to add one thing about Clark. So Clark goes the next year to the international conference on African studies in Addis Ababa, and he challenges Curtin's right to represent American Africanists. And because it's in Addis, mostly there's a lot of powerful Africans in this association, and they elect him to represent African studies in the United States. And Philip Curtin was furious about it, right? In the process, though, he said, look, we can't support apartheid. Why hasn't the African Studies Association made an anti-apartheid declaration? Here, African people are being dominated, and you all are studying this like it's theoretical. It's not theoretical. It's real life and death for African people in Southern Africa. Why haven't we taken a stand on? So Dr. Clark was fired. He did some stuff that's not popularly reported that also advanced the study of Africa from its own perspectives. So that's why I put him and Diop one neck and neck.
Yeah, I'm right with you with there. Okay, let's get to our favorite part of the show. Ivan Van Sertima. Go ahead, Juju. Go ahead, kick that off.
What shall we say about Ivan Van Sertima? I did in the reference to having questions, right? Because even though this book has been academically debunked, trying to figure out why we can't let it go, right? In respect to understanding why Black people want to see themselves in history, right? I think that's important. But we can't let it go for nothing in the world, you know? And then when it comes to bringing up a Mesoamerican anthropologist or architect, right, who has the right correct information, who can show you that there's no DNA evidence, there's no material culture evidence, like, you know, we were Iron Age people, right? I think that I learned that through Sean and Gullo, you know, and reading. But you said it the other day, there would have been some type of iron or some relics. They would have left something, you know, some post-fusion, and there's none of that. So I want you to touch on that a little bit. Why can't we let it go in regards to understanding how we want to see ourselves in history? I kind of knew my answer, but I want you to give us your perspective on that. If that's fair.
Oh, thank you, Juju. I mean, look, I think it's a compound answer. Like part of it is very few people you talk to have actually read the book. That's A. Reading is fundamental, right?
Who you telling?
And nowadays, well, I won't digress. I'll just say you can always drop a PDF into a AI platform and get a summary or go down a rabbit hole on the evidence, and it'll bring up a lot of opportunities for you to grow from what that work didn't do. So part of it is people haven't read the book. The other part of it is Black people in the United States, specifically African Americans in the United States, because there's like Jamaicans here and there's Nigerians here and Haitians here, but African Americans are going through a profound identity crisis. And it's been, catalyzed by social media, the rise of the internet, and self-publishing, which existed in, like Van Sertima self-published that. Well, he published it through a press, but basically it was the same, right? And I think those are reasons why. I think the other reason that's really stood out to me of late is that people don't want to believe Africans couldn't have done it. And this is like in history, in social history, we call this a counterfactual. Counterfactual is something that, like, counterfactual is like, what if the Nazis would have won World War II? Right? What if the Japanese would have won the war in the Pacific? What would the world look like? And there's TV shows that are made based on these premises, like The Man in the High Castle, or even Watchmen make some assumptions about, but these are fictitious. From a social historical standpoint, we only address what actually happened, what we know and try to verify happened, and then we work toward interpreting the significance of what has happened. We're not strictly focused on facts, though. Social historians, I don't see it as my job to tell the people that allow me to get to know their understanding of the past. I'm explaining that very particularly, not who let me study them, but who let me appreciate their understanding of the past. My role is not to say, yep, that happened. Nope, this didn't happen. That's an act of colonial erasure to do that. And it's violence if I were to do that. I care more, and social historians care more about why do they believe that? And what does that tell us about their belief systems? What does that tell us about how they've constructed their past? Like, I care about that. So, so I think that's a part of it. And, for the people, people post sometimes on interviews of mine, oh yeah, you're saying Africans couldn't have traveled here and they only hitched a ride with the white man. That was a comment I responded to a couple of days ago.
Right.
And I'm just like, no, this isn't an argument about capabilities.
Yeah.
Actual capabilities are profound.
Yeah.
So here's the other piece. Now, this is the other answer. I gave you 3 or 4 already. This is the last one.
Yeah.
America's public educational system is horrific on science, evidence. If you ask the average person, what's the scientific method? Many people can't tell you on the street. Right now, Americans have a 11th grade reading level on average. What sense does that make? Everybody got to graduate high school, almost everybody, but that's what we average, a 10th, 11th grade reading level. That's the marketers trying to sell you more milk or whatever they're selling you. They're targeting at a 10th grade, 11th grade reading level. And so now here's the thing. Not only can we not explain the scientific method, we don't even know the social scientific method exists, or the modern archaeological method exists, or the modern computational linguistics methods exist, right? And then even the straight science on the Columbian exchange, our schools do not teach effectively. There are so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying facts, please.
Oh, you just co-sign it, yeah. Look, there are so many illnesses that are endemic to Africa that were carried by African mosquitoes as disease vectors that did not exist in this hemisphere, right? And the other piece that's a piggyback piece to that is, because we don't know science and the social historical method very well, we're completely out of sorts when it comes to understanding the actual narrative of human migration. We don't understand that part of it, and it's problematic. Like, well, there's debate about this, of course, and the dating methods are always changing as new specimens are being discovered. But generally speaking, scholars believe I'm saying all approximations, the out of Africa theory, or it's called the Africa replacement theory. Africans exit, let me back up. Anatomically human Africans exited the continent and then began populating the planet, and they left between 80,000 and 60,000 years ago, and it took them until about 37,000 years before the present to get to the Bering Strait region of Asia, right? And then the land bridge allows them to begin crossing, but then it collapses behind them and glaciers are in front of them that were impassable. So there's a population of people and they didn't just have African genetics. They've been traveling for thousands and thousands of years, right? So
Cooking.
and I'll just say really quickly that my daughter has 40 to 50 major mutations that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens across every generation. I have allergies. My daughter has allergies, some of the allergies I have, but she's got other ones that are new. They don't exist anywhere in my family, not on my mama's side, not on my daddy's side. Just to keep it real for a bit, keep it a buck. So the thing is, when that population gets to the Bering Straits area, they're incapable of moving backward or forward for 20,000 years. And over that 20,000 years, their genetics change. And this is really where the A haplogroup comes from. Now, they were changing the whole time they exited Africa. And it's something I point out whenever I talk about human migration. Mm-hmm. One principle that people don't understand is the minute people exited the African continent, they were not being reinforced by the same genetics that they left with, right? They were encountering new environments, other humanoid life forms, right? And in terms of food, we know, for instance, people in the Arctic Circle, their skin is pretty dark, but they're not on the equator. And it's because seal oil changes their skin color. So you got these people migrating, and some of them are going along the coast. And this is just the overland theory. There's also the overwater theory, where Africans are leaving by boat. They're sailing into the Indian Ocean, and then they're arriving at other destinations. And eventually, over time, they get all the way to Australia, not exclusively by boat, but they get there. And so the thing about it, like, to answer your question, if we don't understand these basic pieces, then it's hard. It's easy for us to assume, oh, well, Black people were everywhere. And it's complicated by the fact that when you look at people in Fiji, I lived and worked in New Zealand for 4 months in 2001. And I got a bunch of Maori friends who are just, they're fire. And
interesting, beautiful culture.
Oh, my beautiful culture. And you talk about capable of singing, these people can sing. They don't sing, they can sing. And it's the same really with Hawaiians. And you know a little bit about the history of the Pacific Rim. The Hawaiian people settled all the way to New Zealand around, well, the dates kind of vary. They're constantly being pushed back, but around the 9th century CE. But like, there are Fijians that I met in New Zealand who have afros. They got black skin. They got broad noses. They got thick lips. Like, they look black. And even the term that the Europeans gave for the Pacific Rim was Melanesia. Like, it's got the root word for melanin is in it, right? But when we talk about African people, we're talking about cultural forms of expression. Not just biological, right? So what are the cultures? Now, some people will look at people in the Pacific Rim and they're like, they have masking traditions. And it's like, yeah, they do. But like, most human beings have, most societies, many societies have masking traditions. And so it becomes like, you can't just reduce it to race. Race isn't going to effectively explain the answer for why that is. And when you look at the DNA and people in the Pacific Rim, they have Denisovan DNA in them.
Yeah.
Right. And there's people in the Philippines, there are people that the Spaniards called Negritos, like, so, and this is thousands. So imagine over 60,000 years, the time that it takes people to reach the Pacific Rim from Africa. They experienced a lot of change, right? Genetically and environmentally. So, I mean, those are all, it's a great question, Juju. Like, I probably ran too long on it, but basically, like, there's a lot of reasons why, like, our education system.
Yeah, you're good.
Boil it down to that, and we just don't appreciate science, our science education. I mean, I thought I heard somewhere the other day that Iran, I'm channeling current events. Iran is like 4th or 3rd in the world in STEM fields and education. In the world, we're 83rd. So that science piece, I think the self-esteem pieces, all of that makes it difficult to let go of those ideas. And for me, the travesty is Africa's verified history that isn't circumstantially supported is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. It doesn't need any augmentation.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, just to say, I'm married to a Gambian. So I have a second residence there. So I'm trying to learn Wolof. So, I've been to a couple of African countries. Yeah, all I know is Jetty Jeff and Dedet. Thank you and no. I can understand a little bit, but that's working. And it's just, I wish people would take the opportunity. We can spend our things on many things, save up for a year, take a trip to West Africa and see what it's about. It definitely changes your perspective and your worldview, even how you think about continental Africans, understanding. I think in Gambia, I can at least name 7 different ethnic groups. You feel me? At least 7. And each ethnic group has its own language, right?
Yeah.
Its own customs, its own traditions, their own carnivals. Like, it is just so vast and diverse. And to put everybody in like one basket and think that is just one group of people, or they're just Africans. No, he's Fulani, he's Wolof. You feel me? That's the Iwe guy. He Igbo. You feel me? It's totally different. You can't do that. You can't do that. It
is. I agree with you. I mean, I think we tend to try to reduce African. First, people have a continental identity for Africa and don't understand there's 5 geographic regions on a continent, and the cultures inside those regions are distinct from the regions around it. So that's definitely true.
Shaped by the nature around it. Sean, you want to add something to that, or ask? I know you're familiar with Dr.
All right, hold on one second. Before we segue into that, man, I want to go ahead and promote this class right here. All right. Deeper African history, reclaiming memory through evidence and story, man. Methods development by scholars across diaspora. This is a powerful class that the great doctor has put together, man. We support the efforts, man. And you can get it right here, man. So he actually, doing his thing, right? And he support us over here, right? And for his support over here, man, you know what I'm saying? We push this thing right here, yo. So he actually, sponsoring the channel, right? Making sure we get something. And I appreciate you, man. You want to say something about this course real quick before we get into the next line of question that's going to get you in trouble on Ivan?
Yeah, sure. I'll bite. So this course is basically the sources and methods of African history. And I look at it from a number of perspectives, but I show how scholars in the Graduate Research Academy at Research One universities around the world, both in the United States and in Africa, study Africa's past. And so this course has 9 different modules, and I won't name them all, but I have an extensive discussion of the sources and methodologies of African history, as well as ideologies for studying it. I talk about ethnicity as a construct and other forms of cross-cutting identity, because as Sister Juju just said, like, Africans don't often just reckon their identity through ethnicity. Sometimes their occupational identities are more important. And there's a range of other identities that they have. So I talk about ethnicity in a lot of detail across all 5 of the continent's regions. I talk about geography and its impact on history. That's a master class on African geography. So I talk about the rainforest zone and how history developed in that zone differently than it did in the Sahel zone in West Africa. So we talk about all of those pieces. I largely use an ancestral evidence method that I developed. So I weave African art history and art and architecture into whatever I teach. So that you're also going to get a micro master class on African art and architecture in this course. So those are all things that we do. I talk about oral historical methodologies. I go into a lot of depth because we tend to conflate like oral testimony with oral history. We'll say, the oral history of my family is, but we might be talking about just oral testimonies. And then there's oral tradition. And I talk about the distinctions between these three areas and how scholars develop oral history, because oral historical method and oral interviews are foundational to doing African history for modern scholars. Like we have a 2-language requirement. So I have a reading language, which is French. I speak a little of it, but I needed that to work in Mali's archives. I was attached to the National Archives of Mali and also the National Museum of Art when I was a Fulbright fellow there. So for a year, I got backdoor access, like to the, basically to the collections that aren't on public display, and the same for the National Archives. So like we cover quite a bit in this course, and a lot of the methodologies and sources I drop, like they come from universities. A lot of people don't know that if there's an African Studies university or center in your city or town, then those programs are funded by Congress to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. So their library acquisitions are crazy. I mean, a lot of times I'll hear people say, oh, the white man is hiding our history from us. And I'm like, if you got a driver's license, you can go get a library card at a graduate research library and you can get anything in the collection. And then I tell them at Indiana University, where I did my grad work, the African Studies collection was 2.5 floors, and each floor was 3 football fields long. If there was any book I needed, all I had to do was go to the Africana Studies librarian. Her name was Marion. She was German. Like, yo, Marion, I need this book for my research. Like, okay, John. I wasn't Dr. John. Now I was just John. Okay, John, we'll get it to you. Boom. She'd email me in a couple of weeks. Come pick up your book. And I keep it as long as I want. I read everything I need to get out of it. I take my notes and then I send it back. So this is not hidden. It's just that many of us don't know we have access to it. So
wait. I think you forgot. It is hidden. It's in a secret vault called the library.
that part. That part. Look, I'll tell you real quick. I mean, I think I mentioned most of it. I do talk about archaeology. There's a community archaeology method that I discuss in detail. Every African country has an archaeology division with ongoing active archaeological digs. And there's places where they report on this. And because the continent's population is growing, it's going to double to 2.5 billion people by 2050. And it's going to triple to maybe 4.3 billion people by the end of this century. As those people the population is growing, it's exploding. As it explodes, they're moving into new areas that haven't been inhabited in millennia, and they're discovering new stuff. So Africa's story is just getting deeper and richer. So I talk about archaeology in this, basically. So I talk about that. I talk about material culture. Like, it's a masterclass on how to get started.
Okay. All right, we'll make sure that link be at the section underneath the video. All right, we'll make sure that be underneath the video, and appreciate you. And yeah, so go ahead, Sean. The Batendians. Matter of fact, we had some people crying because we called the Batendians. But what else would you call a person that's Batendian? That is pretending, I'm saying, to be an Egyptian or to be a Native American. We effectively and most respectfully say you are pretending.
Well, Doc, I want to stick to the Van Sertima work real quick. So there was 2 things in your initial interview on Wise the Dawn. You had said that a good researcher, if you want to get the right information, of course, you got to be a good researcher. Good researchers also do groundwork, which means you got to go to these places and collect and gather data. You said that also again on this show. So when we talk about this book, I got it in my hands. It came before Columbus. When we talk about this book, they came before Columbus. Are you, because I've been at this for about 10 years on this subject. So I'm asking, are you stating that, respectfully, I'm gonna call him a doctor respectfully, right? Are you saying that Dr. Vince Sertima did not travel to certain places and gather the collected data that would be in support of the claims he made in his book?
He didn't travel as a social scientist. Let me put it that way. Like, he did go to Mexico. You know, Tony Browder has a blog post that talks about him being in the Van Wertenau collection in Mexico City, right? So of his figurines. But I mean, the butt's important to me. He was not trained in archaeology, right? And as a linguist, he alleged, well, a couple things, and we probably should talk about what his claims are. But just to answer your question, no, he didn't travel as a social scientist. He traveled as a hyper diffusionist. And the irony is, he had a full opportunity to learn how to conduct oral interviews, oral historical interviews of the local people who lived there to see what they had to say about their origin traditions. But he didn't. That doesn't appear in his writings. Right. So we might consider him a bibliophile in the sense that he primarily worked from textual sources, and most of those sources were authored in the colonial period.
Gotcha. So based on your research and your investment into obtaining knowledge regarding certain subjects, let's just deal specifically with one of his claims. Is there a griot in Mali that has taught the story of Mansa Musa and spoke to it in the manner of which substantiates the story that is being written and regurgitated over and over that was told in Cairo, Egypt?
No. So, you know, basically Al-Umari, a Syrian historian or early Syrian historian, traveled to Cairo and met with the warrant chief who ran the area where Mansa Musa stayed when he was in Egypt. And there was a conversation between Al-Umari and this warrant chief, where the warrant chief alleged that Mansa Musa's predecessor had built 200 or 2,000 boats. The account varies. And then they sailed into the Atlantic. A huge whirlpool opened up and swallowed all the ships except the king's ship. And the king escaped by backpedaling in his canoe and then never to be heard from again. But the griots in Mali, look, I sat at the feet of griots in Mali. I worked at the Institut des Sciences Humaines, which is the Institute of Social Humanities in Bamako, these are all African institutions run by Malians. And the griots say that didn't happen. They couldn't imagine or fathom the leader of an empire leaving his empire. It's not in keeping with Mande cultural values. And so they say no, and they dispute that. They're like, they allege that Mansa Musa, if he did communicate this to the warrant chief in Cairo, was saying that to cover up his own assassination of his predecessor so that he could assume the throne.
Okay, so I'm glad that you. I don't want to break your down.
No, you good. I'm done. You good.
So hold on, Sean. Let me get this super chat. If anybody want a question, you got to do it through the super chats. That's the only way we do it. So you got JJ200 says, is he saying Africans didn't come here before Columbus? He got the eyes.
Not in a way that we can verify. And that's all that you could say. There's all the evidence is, all the I don't even call evidence. All the claims are circumstantial. Right? I won't call it evidence because evidence assumes that it's legitimate and it's past a bar where it's the evidence is accumulated in a quantum. It's from multiple sources simultaneously that are reinforcing these things happen. We don't have material culture, cultural evidence. There's no single African artifact that predates the Columbian expedition to the New World that has ever been discovered on a controlled archaeological dig anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. Not one.
But Doc, you said earlier about disease. There would have been some type of learned immunity in the immune system from people that had already traveled.
That's
so right. That in itself kills the argument because this would be new and introduced. Right. So and that kills the pretendians too, because if we're dealing with novel diseases coming to the New World through the Columbian exchange, which now puts you at odds, and you right. did it right again.
It's funny you mentioned the pretendians because they didn't even read Van Sertima properly because he alleged they were Africans. But the pretendians say, our ancestors sprang up fully formed from the forehead of Zeus right here in North America. No, that didn't happen. So they didn't even read the book right. They half read it. Maybe they were scanning it. And then they just came up with this theory. Of course, it's connected to African-American genealogy. And they say, my grandmama said, and the grandmamas be all over TikTok saying, I ain't tell that boy that.
She fighting back.
Right. Disrespectful. Bring him here. I'll make that boy pick a switch. Not the brown ones, the green ones.
I had a follow-up question.
Yeah, go.
Quiet. So my follow-up is to deal directly with what you were just saying about the griots and so on. We all know that these storytellers are going to tell us everything that we need to know about the Malian Empire, the history, and what they've obtained and passed down. Some of it could be a little exaggerated. Some of it could be right on par. Now, you said earlier that it is known to people that Mansa Musa himself was not in line for kinship, but a usurper. Nothing wrong with it. We know it happens, right? And Can Musa is his name. So we have evidence for that, but we don't have evidence for all the other things that was, I guess, labeled circumstantial evidence that's argued in chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of this book.
Right. I mean, you not asking me a question, so I'm just you made a declarative statement. I agree.
So I want to know this. Here's the question. And this goes back to the story of going out into the ocean. Did Africans possess the technology to travel the ocean in the earlier parts of the 13th and 14th centuries before vital technology was ever created in the 15th century to help set sail? Could they take them logs and get out in the Atlantic and cross it?
I mean, the short answer is not that we know of, right? And on a couple different levels. One, the Niger River system, and you can add the Senegal River system to this too. Those systems, I mean, these are river faring systems. Facts. The canoes don't have sails. Now, I want to just put a pin in this, Brother Sean, because Van Sertima alleges, and when he testified before Congress, he alleged sustained contact between the Americas and Africa, right? To have sustained contact, well, he alleged the Nubians did it. They had square sails. I'll leave it to the chat to just go Google, can you sail against the wind with square sails? I don't even have to tell the answer to that. No. Right. And so that's a problem. And Go ahead. I'm sorry, Miss Juju.
No, you good. Well, I talked about this about cell technology and how that's actual technology in the engine. And Africans were mostly riverboat people, and they didn't have that, So
that's right.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
And this is speaking to both your points. Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen or it couldn't have happened, but we don't have any evidence of a shipbuilding industry in West Africa.
But Van Sertima in chapter 3 of his book talks about maritime travel, saying they had a whole naval suit that would leave the center of the desert in Mali, travel all the way to Senegal, just to get these ships from Mali to Senegal, and then get in the Atlantic and go.
Right. And look, whether the account alleges 200 boats or 2,000, both are big numbers, but you got to cut down a lot of trees. Like, it takes to build a shipbuilding or seafaring industry. There are things you have to have. The canoes that we find that are archaeologically preserved, like they use knotting from ropes to lash these structures together. Well, when you're crossing the Atlantic, those ropes become waterlogged and they can actually collapse, right? So when people are saying that, here we go in the chat. Yeah, it's a square sail. You just go check that boat from Khufu. You're right. There is one at the Great Pyramid Complex at Giza, but the Mediterranean is not the Atlantic.
No,
right?
Different animal.
Yeah, and there currents like there's a Canary current that runs through the Canary Islands and off of it. But the problem is potentially you could get there, but how are you going to get back? Right. And there are
Let me
go ahead.
I would like to add this point right here. First of all, Europeans bumped into Barbados. They didn't know where the hell they was going. We need to stop that.
They didn't.
The reason they couldn't get out of Africa because they didn't know they was in Africa and there was nowhere else to go. Yeah. So if I were to blindfold you and erase your memory, right now, take a human being, erase all his memory of everything that he ever knew, and throw him and his family in the middle of, say, Denver, Colorado, and the forest of Denver. It might take you 100 years to get about that forest. It ain't like they knew where they was going, right?
That's true.
And so the Europeans didn't know where the hell they was going. I get tired of that, man. They didn't know where they was going. It was we trying to find another route to China, right? Man, they was trying to go around taxes and all that. You know how they doing it. They bumped into it. I mean, by sheer utter luck. No, Christopher Columbus did not discover America, or he was in the Caribbean. He was in Barbados, man. And it was luck. And luckily, they was like, oh, wow. And remember, that was part of the process that helped erode, right? The natural philosophers, quote unquote, authority. Simple as that. It was by luck. So they get science by luck. Because now they say, oh, new plants, new, flora, okay, animals, fauna, luck. Yeah. So let's not play this game like they was experiencing. Yeah, we're going to go and chart it out. That didn't happen. But once they figured it out, right, Cedric said all the time. He say, man, so you got sailors, right? All of a sudden, they would come back, and now they got a whole, they got like a wealth of knowledge that the scholars of the time never even had, because now they sailed there. They say, whoa, we seen whole different people. So, man, I just wanted to add that to the thing. I think I talked a little bit too long, but that's the point.
Real quick before y'all go on.
All right, let's read the chat.
Chuck Morgan. Shout out Chuck Morgan.
Shout out to Chuck Morgan. Enjoying the presentation, the questions, and the panel. Thank you, Dr. Aiden. Yeah, Chuck is also a serious dude when it comes to SUMA and the information, and he's a proponent of giving the truth. He do not play black SUMA because they the black heads. He don't play that game. He don't play that game. Appreciate you, Chuck, for your unwavering work in the community, man. And you're definitely a friend and a supporter of the show. And one last point, and I'm gonna shut up. I think you talked about so does Sertima have a daggone degree? I'm tired of playing. I gotta take the gloves off, man. Because these spawned the whole thing full of pseudos, and then you get quote unquote, you mentioned them who you just talked about? What's the name you talked about that said it was in the archives? What's his name? I can't even. Anthony Broader. Anthony Broader's playing too. They all playing. Dr. Ben played with the subject, act like they all got trapped in this wild idea that we came to Americas. It's okay.
Now they rely back on Van Sertima. Dr. Clark tells you that. He said that's not his lane. All of them, even Diop, the exchanges between Diop and Van Sertima all link those email exchanges and those letters that were exchanged all say that was his field. That was his argument.
Yeah, that's his field, right?
Yeah,
but
they backed out of that.
They backed good, okay. But we ain't know it just now. We just realized they backed out of it. But ain't nowhere in the world Anthony Broader in 2026, who's actually on an archaeological dig, he should not be supporting that idea at all. So I rest my case. I'm not leaving none of them out of it. I don't feel like playing because the pseudos and the fake Indians and the fake Egyptians is all over the place, and it's stopping people like you, Dr. Aiden, from giving real history because they don't want to hear it. They want to hear the African American Egyptian, the African American Native American. You know what I mean? They want to hear that. That's spectacular. And it gets in the way of courses that you have of authentic African history. That's my point. Rest my case.
Right. So, I mean, Van Sir, I can speak to it real quickly. His doctorates were honorary. We can talk about what an honorary doctorate functions like in the academy.
Let's talk about it.
If Harvard were to give me an honorary doctorate in cognitive psychology, I'm not qualified to speak on that. I don't know nothing about it. I mean, I do know a little bit, but I don't know enough to have done the coursework and the field work, right? It's a two-tiered, kind of evidentiary standard you have to meet. Van Sertima earned his bachelor's degree from the School of Oriental and African Studies at University of London in 1969, and in 1977, the year after he published They Came Before Columbus, he earned his master's degree. All his other degrees when he wrote the book, he didn't have a master's degree. Okay, so that's his actual biography.
It functions as an award, don't it? Honorary degrees, if you put it right, and when you're trying to get a job or something, you got to say, this wasn't an award. You're not supposed to carry it as a title. I just want to say that.
That's right.
Oh, big up to this book right here. Sean P. What SARS-CoV-2 taught me. Yeah, I was joking when I that was a little childish of me. When Sean got childish. Yeah, you got to get this. I'm going to send you a free copy. I got you. I'm going to send you a free copy. Yeah, this is definitely armed us in the pandemic, yo. Big up to Sean. And I shouldn't have did that. I should.
We passed it. We passed it. We know what was going on. We know what was going on.
Bobby got like 100 copies of them.
I got about 10 copies of them. Yeah, come on, bro. Let's stop it. Anyway, back to the interview. We listened to Dr. John Aiden, and back to that wild acting like you a doctor, and we keep calling him that. And you skated around. Dr. Ben ain't had no degrees neither, and none of that, which is good. I'm saying it because just the sheer things that had to go through with the racism, like you can't go to the white library, the color barrier, all that wasn't eroded yet, right? But Ivan, I don't think he has no excuses for this. I think I heard it, and big up to Wise the Dome. I heard you talk about how he had a chance to recant that nonsense, right? But he didn't. Let's talk about that, and then we want to talk about the peer review process. Go ahead.
Right. So, I mean, just basically, there's a major he publishes his They Came Before Columbus on like November 12th, 1976. While that's happening, a major study is wrapping up on the Olmecs. Before that, the assumption was the Olmecs were a much younger civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But then the study came out and the dates from the archaeology, from the dating, pushed everything back. So they realized this society had been in existence since 1500 BCE, thereabouts, right? And so Mali doesn't come into existence until the year 1230 or 1235. So you're talking about a 2700 year, loosely, right? Close enough, 2700 year difference. So the idea that the Malians founded the Olmec Empire, now that, you know, that's not supported. And so Van Sertima realized this was a significant problem for his argument. So he tried to adjust the dates. But initially, according to some correspondences, he told some of the scholars who were confronting him about this that he would recant. And then later, he said he would put the recantation in his journal. And that's a conflict of interest because traditionally, if there's a conflict between two scholars over, say, dating or when a civilization existed, or this diffusionist claim that the Olmecs emerged from as a result of ancient Egyptian or Malian intervention, that would be published in a third-party journal that is not a party to the conflict. And the letters of both the scholarly groups would be published together. So you have a chance to read Van Sertima's recantation. You have a chance to read the other scholars who are saying this is problematic. Well, if you pull that into your own journal, it's a conflict of interest because the peer review process in the academy is designed to be a double-blind process, right? Now, what I mean by double-blind is that, I'll just add this as a caveat. I was the managing editor of the scholarly academic peer-reviewed journal Africa Today, published by Indiana University Press for 2 years. So, and I helped resuscitate that journal because the editors, who are all full professors in the African Studies program, were like, we need to resuscitate this journal and get publications coming through it. In the publication process, review process, it's a double blind process because say a professor submits, this is a real case example, Nigerian professor submitted a paper to us on Nigeria's oil industry, which is big because if you're watching the news right now, the Dangote refinery is like huge, right? And that's a whole separate conversation, but it's more current events and news about Africa than history. But so he submits this paper to us. Every academic journal has a style guide. I wrote the style guide for Africa Today in conjunction with these full professors. So he submits the paper to us. What I then had to do was first sanitize the work. I had to strip all the headers out, any mention of the university where he was attending or, any mention of him by name. I sanitized the work so nobody knows it's him. Now, of course, in the academic world, there's some overlap. Someone might know he was working on that paper. And so if I were to approach that, professor to say, can you review this work? The professor has a duty-bound obligation to say, I'm aware of this paper already. I cannot review it. Because that would be a bias and a conflict of interest, right? And it could be a positive conflict of interest or a negative. They might like the professor or they might like the graduate student who's submitting this work, or they can't stand their guts. Either way, it could be a problem. If they like the student, they might give some of their weaker arguments a pass, and that's not going to do, right? So what happens is now I work with the editors and the internet to identify scholars around the world who are field subject matter experts in the history of the Nigerian oil industry. I find 3 of those scholars. It's an odd number because when we ask them to review a work, they're going to give a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a maybe, or yeah, you should publish it. But there's some things the author missed. Maybe while they were writing it, a new piece of work came out that was really critical in the field and changed the direction of understanding on Nigerian oil history, right, as an industry. So they write a detailed assessment of the work, these professors, and they send it back to me. I'm the layer as the managing editor that keeps the pieces at arm's length from one another. They don't know whose work they're reviewing, and the person who submitted the paper for review for publication doesn't know who's reviewing their work. Because if they knew that, they could just pick up the phone and say, hey, Bob, or hey, Janine, give me a great review on this paper. I just put it in Africa Today, and then it can all work in cahoots behind the scenes. So it's a double blind process. So, you know, peer review is important. Now, the Afrocentrists argued that white scholars were incapable of reviewing their work because they were white and therefore they were racist. And there were some of those people in the academy, right? So it's not like the argument didn't have any merit. And I always want to stress that. But the peer review process is a double blind process. Now, once I get the, you know, once I get the comments back and they say, yes, if 2 of the reviewers out of 3 say, publish this, and I take that to the editors, and the editors say, yep, but we're going to publish it. And I wasn't Dr. John then, just John, go contact this author from Cross River State in Nigeria and tell them, yes, we want to publish your work, provided you accommodate the changes that the reviewers have suggested. So then I work with the author to make the changes. We figure out which issue it's going to come in, the spring issue, fall issue, winter issue, whatever, and then it gets published. That's how peer review works. Now, I teach a class to a group of people, where isn't so important, on African history. And about a month ago, there was a sister in there, and she said, oh, you know, well, Ivan Van Sertima, she was really upset because the class before we had talked about Van Sertima and some of his lack of qualifications. And she came back to the next class loaded for bear. And I opened up the class instead of just jumping into the lecture. I was just like, hey, anybody got questions? Because I knew people were going to have questions. So she was like, I just really want you to reassess your stance because Van Sertima had his work reviewed. His friends reviewed his work. You know, and that's not peer review, that's friend review. You know, what are we doing here? So that's how peer review works. Now, let me just say this piece before, because I know you want to jump in with some questions.
We're going to jump on the super chat and then let Mel go. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that peer review is not flawless. Any scholar worth their salt will tell you it's not flawless. Like, there's been a push to increase publication velocity in the last 10 years. So, like, you know, graduate students are really being pressed to publish. And often before they get their doctorate, they're being pressed to publish. And once you get your doctorate, it's publish or perish. But now it's on steroids. So, but peer review is the best system we have for eliminating as many of the biases as we can. But there's certain, you know, sometimes this is why, as a managing editor, I strip out the institutions, because if you know, the reviewers see, oh, this person went to Harvard, I'm going to big up that program because I know the chair of that department, and that chair is a good friend of mine, and he's a great scholar. And so they're not focusing on the quality of the work. Why peer review is so powerful is it evaluates the work on its merits. But it does have some limitations, but it's the best system we have. It's not flawless. And so I just want to point that out, because sometimes people think, well, they say peer review, like that's the, you know, that's the final boss killer. But it's not, it's close, but it's not always. So, you know, but it is important, and the whole academy runs on it. And here's the other piece. Now, let's tie this back to Van Sertima real quick. Then I'm shut up. We'll do the super chat. So Van Sertima was in a position to select people who published works in the Journal of African Civilizations who were sympathetic to his belief system. So he picked scholars who validated his thesis. But you know anything about the social scientific method, and even the scientific method, the facts are supposed to fit, are supposed to gin up the theory, right? Not the other way around. You're not supposed to have a theory and then use the facts to prove the, you know, evidence to prove it. That's, you got the cart before the horse. And
Like
so
the
just
Bible.
from a structural standpoint,
Mhm.
he had the cart before the horse. And other scholars were complaining about that during his lifetime.
Mm.
They were like, he's in a position to select people sympathetic to his worldview, and this is propaganda, not scholarship. Right.
All right. Mm. So can we say he was scamming? Now let me stop. Let me go to he was a little bit, I don't know. He sounded like he was a little
What would you be if you were selling millions of book copies?
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
the money got him.
Gravy
Money
Train
talking
got hard to
bullshit.
ignore right there. Gravy
Yeah,
Train
he
got
was like,
hard
I
to
don't know
ignore.
about this one. I'm not sure. I'll die on this one. So look, not on one magnificent, man. Thanks for the super chat and the support, man.
That's Mac Rob.
Mac Rob, that's Mac Rob. Oh, Big Mac, man. Cyril Killer Official, he said, excellent show. All right. And then we got another super chat. Kari 9 says, very necessary intervention. Great interview. House of Skeptics. All day, every day, man. Appreciate the super chats, man. Like I said, we'll answer your questions in the super chat. Go ahead, Mel. Cyril Killer, what's up, man? What's good?
Hey, what's up, man? Hey, Dr. So I wanted to touch back on the last part about Van Sertima. I have a Washington Post article from 1977. You're right. At first, he wasn't going to publish it because his peers had him want to publish like a magazine article first when he read, I believe it was Leo Weiner's work. I can't remember the title, but he read his work. And then they wanted him to publish a magazine piece. And then I think he took a trip to Mexico where he saw von Rutenau. And I think after that is where he decided to stop the publication. But I think if I'm correct, you can let me know from that. But I think his peers also pushed him to push the book because he wasn't going to push the book after that. After he saw some of von Rutenau's work, he wasn't sure, even though he used it. I think he really wasn't going to publish it after that, but he was pushed to. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, you correct in that. And the book by Weiner was Africa and the Discovery of America, 1920 to 1922.
Yeah, three books of bullcrap.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean,
right, so I gotta.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right.
All right, so I do have a question.
Yeah, shoot.
Yeah, I do have a question that I wrote down for this show. And this is for you. Where is the methodological? I butchered this word. Where's the methodological line between recovering overlooked African history and projecting modern Black racial identity onto ancient peoples and civilization?
Ooh, wow, mouthful question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna answer this in a kind of roundabout way, but you'll get why in a second. So, a modern scholars of Africa who are operating at the doctoral level have to learn 2 languages. I mentioned that already. We cannot be armchair anthropologists for the most part. Okay, so that means we have to actually travel in situ in Latin. We got to go to the place. We need to conduct oral interviews. Doesn't matter how long ago the thing happened, because oral history, oral traditions can go back pretty far. Like I mentioned this, in a few other interviews, but a few years ago there was a discovery in Australia among Aboriginals, a star that didn't, their oral histories identified a star in the southern sky that was visible 14,000 years ago. So, and they also described a land bridge that connected Australia to Tasmania, which is gone now, which tells us that oral traditions can go back really far and have historically verifiable information. And the quantum of evidence piece is that I'm gonna get to the blackness piece in a second, but the quantum of evidence piece is you got, for oral, how do you corroborate oral claims? You look at ethnobotanical evidence, you look at archaeolinguistic evidence, you look at, there's a number of, obviously now you can look at genetic evidence, you can look at GIS evidence. There's just, you can use different dating methods like carbon, 14 dating is now the only dating game in town now. There's other ways to date materials. So like the scientific ground on which claims can be made has expanded exponentially with the advent of the computer, and then just human beings iterating on that. So where's the methodological ground? I mean, it might sound a little heretical, but I'm hard pressed to think of any Africanist scholars I know in history or other disciplines who are not like pretty ardently against anti-blackness. Like, it's sort of hard to study Africa, especially Africa south of the Sahara Desert, and it doesn't mean that people can't harbor racist ideas. They can. Like, that's self-evident. The anthropologists and ethnographers of the early 20th century, they had white supremacist ideas. It's the ideas that you travel with and refuse to allow mediation, through your experiences that create problems for scholars. So I will also say that, I mean, it's kind of been doing the rounds a lot, but this idea that Africans have the greatest genetic diversity of any other group on earth, facts, like we know that. And we also have the greatest linguistic diversity, like the elbow of West, I like to call it the elbow of West Africa. That little, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, there's like 480 languages in that area right there. There's more languages there than in any other place on earth. It's the most hyper linguistically diverse area. I have friends in Mali who don't come from that area who speak 13 languages, 9 languages, right? So I think when it comes to like appreciating Black identity at the African cultural level, we got to dig into what are the cultural values and linguistic terms in those societies that value Blackness. Like, and they do exist. There's groups of people that say, well, Blackness is a term that white people created, so we shouldn't use it. And, I just always push back against that because, like, take Mali, for instance, in the Bamana language, I'll put it in the chat. In the Bamana language, there's this word, Farafina, and it means African. Now, and it stands for the land, but it also stands for the people. Within that term is the word Finman. Finman in Bamana, the term Fin means black. Finman means black skin. Farafina means Black African. And it's a term of beauty. So when people tell me, like, and it's not just that I'm finishing a PDF just to visualize it, but that examines all across all 5 regions, how did Africans use the term Black in their own cultures? And some people will say, well, everybody was Black, so there was no need to distinguish between one another, so there's probably no terms for Black or Blackness. That's not true. That's not true. So in those societies, and when we think about, there's 3 base populations on the African continent, and maybe we're learning there might have been more, but there's 3 major ones that in ancient times came together, and contemporary DNA of African Americans is like drawn from the confluence of those. You got Southern Africa, you got Central Africa, you got East Africa. Now we're learning a little bit about North Africa with Jebel Irhoud, where some Homo sapiens remains were discovered that date to 300,000 years ago, like before the present. So my point is, Blackness is a continuum, and in some societies it has different meanings. Now Grand Archivist, like Brother Mel, like that's on the African side, and I want to answer the African American side. Right. I'll tell you a story. So when I went to Mali, I was conducting my Fulbright field research for my doctoral thesis, and I left Bamako, took the bus, went to a gateway town to the city of this. It's really a town, but the town of Segu. This gateway, village. It was a village called Segu Sikoro, and I had to go there in order to get permission from the chief of Segu Sikoro to go ask questions of people in Segu. So I go to meet him the day before. I'd gone to the central market in downtown Bamako. I bought white cola nuts, had them wrapped in banana leaves, and I had a gift of money because these are exchanges between the global north and the global south. You don't just jack people for their knowledge and don't compensate them for that, given the economic differentials that exist that would not be equitable. And so you bring white cola nuts because they mean peace. But if you hand someone red cola nuts, it means war, right? So I took the white ones. I handed them to the chief, and I'm greeting him in Bamana. I could speak Bamana for about an hour and 45 minutes. I mean, I haven't been in Mali in a minute, so it takes me a week. I got to listen. Once I listen, and I can speak Bamana for an hour and 45 minutes before people realize I'm not a native speaker. They see me, they know I'm not a native speaker because they call me red. They know I'm an African American, but my skin looks red, right?
That's right.
How we talk about red bones.
Compared to them.
So I'm speaking to this chief and I'm greeting him. I'm going through all the formal greetings, Inisa Goma, you in the morning, Somo Gobedi, how is your family? Ikakene, how is your father? Ifabedi, how's your mother? Ibabedi, how's your male son? Idenke Badi, how's your female, your first daughter? Idemfulo Muso, Badi. I'm going through the greetings and he grabs my arm with his arm at the forearm. So we're a forearm greeting like this. You never do that in Mali. It's only a leave taking among very serious old friends. Now, I can speak Bamana at this level because when I was at IU, just quick segue, when I was at IU in Bloomington, my Bamana instructor, a man named Umaru Kamara, who the Kamaras are in the Sunjata epic, lineage in the Sunjata epic. He was my Bamana instructor. And then when I won these fellowships and grants, he was like, you can come stay with my family. No question. I won't even hear of it. You're going to stay with my people. So he was the chair. When he left IU to go back to Mali, he became the chair of the linguistics department at the National University. We're talking about somebody with a very deep studied understanding of Bamana and Mande languages. He taught me. He also taught the Peace Corps workers. But I know stuff the Peace Corps workers don't even know. Because I'm living in his compound, and every time I had a question, he's answering it. So this man shakes my hand like this, and he had already told me. And then what the chief said just blew me away. He said, we have not seen your face in over 300 years. What do you say to that?
Wow.
What do you say to that? Right? He was talking about us being African. And the focus wasn't on the blackness, but he was just like, he used the term. He said, Eye Farafinau de, you are an African. What'd you say to that? Right? Mm-hmm. So African studies, you'd be surprised at how many scholars, the African and African American scholars who have these experiences, we write about them because you're expected to disclose the breadcrumb trail of how you arrived at studying your topic. We also tell field research stories because they're so foundational. But for Black people, I got tears in my eyes. Black people who study Africa have these experiences and they're profound. Like there's a whole different spiritual thing happening when that moment happens to you, and it didn't just happen to me once. When I hear people in the diaspora wars saying, oh yeah, continental Africans hate us. And it's like, well, there's a-holes in every population. If you got bad apples in every population, but I got nothing but love. The whole time I was there, I never felt threatened. I always felt safe. People just took care of me. And, so I'll tell you another part of this story. So one day, Grand Archivist Brother Bam, one day I was in the courtyard. So when I first got to Mali, Umaru, the chair of the linguistics department at the National University, was like, I was like, I'm ready to go talk at the kids at the National University. He was like, you ain't ready. So he handed me like 2 5-year-old kids, and they drag me around the neighborhood and they make me pronounce words. And they'd be like, they tell me what a butterfly was, and then they asked me later that week, and I couldn't remember because all new terms. And 5-year-olds like, you stupid. Why can't you remember?
I think I remember you telling us before.
The word embodiment for butterfly is free because it's onomatopoeia. That's the sound of the wings from Bamana perspective. Free. So they'd say, "What is that?" And I'm like, I can't remember. Like, you stupid. And when Umar would get home, they go up and whisper to him, "Yeah, this American, he's not too bright." I had a Toshiba laptop that weighed 18 pounds. And I was typing everything. At the end of every day, I'm typing all the stuff I'd learned that day. And I did that for I did it over a course of 3 years. And I studied Bamana for 8 years, like off and on. So mostly on. And so here's the thing. So one day I'm sitting in a chair and a little boy, maybe he's 5 years old. He comes out of his family's house in this compound. There was 4 houses in the compound. One of the houses was a goldsmith. His family had been goldsmiths in Mali for 800 years. That was their genealogy. But this is in the house next door. And so he had 2 wives. This was the second wife's house. This little boy comes out and he's like, and he's like fake crying. And so I said to him in Bamana, you want me to give you something to cry for? The women are pounding millet with the mortar and pestle in the courtyard next to me, and they heard me say that. The pestles went flying in the air. They fell out. They were like, "Hey, kid, a Bamana, yada that." Who told you that? You are a true Bamana. I was like, I'm flattered. I'm not a true Bamana, but they was like, no, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Who told you that? How did you learn this deep Bamana expression? We say this to our kids. I was like, I heard that when I was growing up. I just translated it 1-to-1. So when people say there's different theories about Black cultural retention. Obviously, Africanisms are the way that many of us in spaces like this understand our ancestry. But for a long time, and it was advantageous for white people and slave owners to argue this in the antebellum period, Black people had no history. They didn't believe Black people were capable of language on the African continent. They thought it was just mumbling and rudimentary. They didn't understand it was operating across, multiple registers simultaneously with tones. And like Bamana has 5 tones for every syllable in a word. You change the tone, you change the meaning of the word. They had compressed knowledge down into these spaces that could be manipulated across dimensions, right? And so Europeans and white Americans, in the antebellum period, they were like, oh, these people don't have the benefit of language. And they assumed the tabula rasa argument that African Americans had a blank slate culturally, and everything had been erased from them in the transatlantic slave trade, and everything had been poured into them was them misunderstanding and mislearning like what white people had to teach them. But we know today, that's not true. That's not how socialization works. That's not how language works. And in the number of survivals, there's lots of them. Flash of the Spirit, Robert Farris Thompson's book, or even, even if we talk about Lorenzo Dow Turner and Gullah Geechee terms, he discovered 4,000 terms that are African terms or African term influence. The average working vocabulary of a human being is 15,000 words. That's a third. Right. So, so long story short, I hope I'm answering. You're asking me for the methodological side of it. So I'm giving you the different methodologies that help us understand who we are. But it's really clear that we're African descended people. Mm-hmm. Even when I get into the linguistics, like how we say we in the building, and you hear Jay-Z or whoever say that, it's like we're dropping the last consonant at the end of a word. That's West African linguistics. So when people say, we're not African or call me a Black American, I haven't been to Africa. I don't know any Africans. I never found any Africans in my genealogy. I'm just like, okay, whatever, shut up.
I gotta. Can you rewind for 1 second? Because the pseudo will take this and run around the world. You said something about blackness. Now, for some clarity, right? Obviously,
Great
we're
point.
not racializing it, right? Right? You're not saying that they. Okay, you know what? I don't know how you're gonna answer that,
Let him go.
but it's a two parts to it, right?
Go for it. Go for it.
So, what do you mean by blackness? Because I hear people start to spitting off DNA markers and dive out the window with the blackness. Like, I never know what the hell that means. Right? I understand that we're Homo sapiens sapiens and we see in color. So, absolutely, they had the ability to recognize different shades of different colors. That ain't what I'm talking about. Like, we overwhoop the blackness. I heard John Henry Clark say, we've basked in the blackness for far too long now. There is no country, there's no home, right, called black. You know what I'm saying? There is no country that's not identifiable, right? So what was you talking about when you said the blackness? Let's just clear that up.
I mean, so I'll give you a Mande culture example to ground it in a particular language. So in Mande culture, I mentioned like Farafina, the term for Africa. Fiinman is embedded in the root word fiin, which means black. So they're talking about skin, and they are talking about a type of identity. But in Bamana culture, there's also this idea, there's a dyad. This dyad is not a binary. I'm gonna put it in the chat real quick, but this dyad is Jaya, and I'm just gonna put a slash here, and DB, right? So I'm putting that in the chat. So in Mande cultures, Jaya means clean. It could be translated as white, but mostly it just means clean. Now, Africans in many religious practices would use white powder to channel spiritual access to other realms, right? And so that was a part of how trance could be initiated. And sometimes when a person was in a state of trance, people in the audience would throw the white powder on them, or often it was members of the like shrine priests would do that. So DB means obscurity. Sometimes black can be obscure. Sometimes it can be clear. So blackness is as a construct is really deep and multi-layered. It's not just a racial identity. But for people in Mali, they were interacting with people who didn't have jet black skin, because the Bamana speakers have jet black skin. They have jokes in Mali and Mande culture in Mali that if you are from Kai, there's a city named Kai. I'll just put that in the chat. It's in, you're headed toward Mauritania on the way out of Mali. North of Bamako is this city named Kai. Maybe it's northwest. They say if you're from Kai, it's hotter there than it is in hell. And we're darker than Satan. It's a joke, right? And so there is racialized identity. Yeah, it's right. It is. So, Mande speakers are very dark skinned.
Hold on, you said they say we blacker than Satan, so that means they must have came in contact with colonial powers to say that.
Well, they came in contact with Arabic because shaitan is the word for Satan in Arabic.
Okay. There you go. People forget that. People forget that.
Okay.
Yeah. And you might
they're still colonizers, but go ahead.
Yeah, right. I'm not ignoring that. Like, if you want,
that's a key point. I don't want to run that. It's a key point.
If you want to learn more, like, you just got to look at, the treatises of Ahmad al-Tumbukti in the 17th century, I believe, 1655, something like that. My dates might be a little off, but I think that's right. He wrote a treatise on whether it was permissible to enslave Africans south of the Sahara, whether it was permissible for Muslim and Arab traders to cross the Sahara and enslave sub-Saharan African people. He wrote an entire treatise on it. And so that treatise became a standard. And, maybe I can put that in the chat too. But the treatise. I'm struggling with me remembering the name of it off the top of my head, but it's called the Miraj al Sud. Here, I'll put this in the chat. People can just Google it if they want. We just call it the Mirage for short.
Mm-hmm.
This treatise was the first Arab, well, at least that we know of. It was the first Muslim/Arab examination of race in North Africa in relationship to sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm.
And so in it, he basically argued according to the Quran, you have to set an enslaved person free if they converted to Islam. But that wasn't happening in the region. And so he's writing this treatise to castigate the slave traders in North Africa for doing that. Well, the slave traders took that document and used it to extend the slave trade even deeper. And so it didn't have the effect he intended. So there are ideas about race. We'd probably call them proto ideas about race in Africa south of the Sahara. And then, when you see people who look at the Khoisan speakers in Southern Africa, they say, oh, well, these people aren't black. Like they have more reddish tones in their skin. So there were, now I'm glad you asked this question. What we're really talking about on one level is colorism, but not with the modern overlay. Like for the Arabs and the Muslims, yes, they developed their own, I'll call it their own Arab supremacist ideas about whiteness. They did, right? And we know that some of those ideas arrived south of the Sahara and affected some of the people who live south of the Sahara, right? And so, a modern Malian wedding is really fascinating. Wives, especially elite wives, will have a lot of base on their faces and their necks and their arms. And they don't look like how you would see them in everyday life, where their skin is much darker. And I would ask women who are getting married, is there a reason why people do that? And the women would say, yeah, it's French. This is French. This is the French standard, the French culture. They'd wear wigs, etc. The husbands never did that. So race is real complicated in African societies, and the farther back you go. But you're right. It wasn't the modern notion of race. No, it wasn't.
Okay.
These were other culturally bound ideas about race in those societies.
So here's the one. Hope to start the fight up again. Did the Egyptians call themselves the black people?
Stop it. Stop it. You guys give me in real trouble.
Man, look, I just want to, shoot.
You clown. I'll leave that with Jabari to figure out.
Go ahead, Juju. Go out there. Your answer, the non-answer that question. Hey, it's deafening. Go ahead, Juju and Sean. Go ahead. Back to Ivan and the All Max.
Yeah.
I'm talking about them All Max heads.
Go ask Sean. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sean.
I'll ask the same thing.
No, go, Juju.
I was going to ask about Monument F.
You familiar with Monument F?
Go ahead and ask, Sean.
Here we go.
Yeah, so you going to go? You want me to go? Well,
you go.
Yeah. So we had this discussion about Monument F. Where did we get this out of? I don't even know how to start. I forgot how to start, Bobby.
Monument F?
Yeah, but how did it start, though?
It was a Facebook post, and I had a debate, and I was trying to say Monument F was an indigenous African, El Negro. What's it called? El Negro.
Called El Negro, but we know that the indigenous people call it. Nobody, not even the archaeologists, well, the village people discovered it, but he was, I guess, the first Westerner that had
YMCA? The village people.
Well,
Ah,
indigenous people.
I know what you're talking about. I'm just pulling your leg.
Yeah. What was his name? I think Stringer. He was one of the first anthropologists or archaeologists who actually like seen the figure, measured it, did all that great stuff. So he just called it Monument F, right? But people got this idea that monkey was a black man to affirm that Africans were here in the New World, pre-Columbian. I think that's what we're getting at. So how do you feel about that whole subject?
I mean,
I was going to ask Sean, do you want to add anything onto it? Because you probably was going to be, okay. Go ahead, Dr. Aiden, Dr. John.
Yeah, no, I mean, so here's the thing, like the first reporting on it, like around 1862, I think, and there are other monuments in a similar category discovered by, I'm using loosely, right? Discovered by a man named Jose Melgar y Serrano. They assumed that they just called these Ethiopian because that was the term used for African, like a generic African phenotype. The irony is, so there's great debate among art historians about how to interpret these monuments. And I'll come to that in a second. What's not in debate is that all of the quarries are local. And all the quarries, the toolkits of the quarriers have been found, and they're all stone tools. So these were not quarried with iron tools. That's significant, right? So because this is the Stone Age, it's a Neolithic culture.
Mm-hmm.
So just keeping that in mind takes us back to this broader question about Africans, especially West Central Africans. Everywhere they went, they took iron with them. So, and I talked about in a few other interviews, like, I'll digress for a second. I'm going to talk about the Mande scripts while I do it. So that might kill two birds with one stone. But I want to come back to these sculptures. So one, like, there's no monumental stone head carving in West Central Africa. That's important. So there's no tradition that they're coming from that establishes continuity on the other side of the Atlantic, on the African side. That's the other pieces are, especially the figures with the helmets, they have what looks like plaited or braided hair, but those are actually quetzal feathers, which are prized in this region. Not only in Mexico, but all across South and Central America, the quetzal feathers are highly prized because they're very colorful. And they were in the headdresses of, say, the Aztec warriors, etc.
Wait, hold on. I don't mean to cut you off, but I ain't lying. I swear, about 20 years ago, boy, I'd have cussed you out if you'd have said they wasn't them damn braids. And you know what's crazy? Your bias actually make you see braids.
They look like it.
Yes.
And then when you realize, then I think Sean and them brought it up.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, they ain't no braids, feathers. And then you see the feathers. You're like, oh. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you. I
appreciate that because you adding y'all, all three of y'all adding layers to the conversation. Like, your bias is super important. Now, there's a site you can go to, thevisualcapitalist.com. The Visual Capitalist has a chart of 188 known cognitive biases that social scientists have identified that human beings experience. And so anchoring bias is one of those. What you heard a long time ago becomes the truth, and what you hear more recently does not become the truth, right? And these can coexist and contradict one another, which is where we get cognitive dissonance. So you got anchoring bias, but then you got recency bias. If someone just heard of Van Sertima's work, oh, his work must be the truth because your mind says it's the most recent thing. And then you got confirmation bias, which is what you all are talking about. Oh, I have a belief system, and what I see is confirming that belief system to be real and exact. So I'm going to follow that. And those are just 4 biases off the top of my head. But there's 188 known cognitive biases on the visual capitalist, right, site. So it's important to just keep in mind, like, we're not blank slates. We're not a tabula rasa. We come with all of our assumptions and beliefs, etc. So when people say it now, what the art historians say is that these were intended to be loose portraits, and that there are people that look like those sculptures, those heads in, that part of Mexico, but also across Central America. We could talk about the skin color map. We could talk about how the, sun affects, phenotypic presentation in human beings in warm climates. And all across the equator, you see people with thick lips and wide noses. That's not so unusual. Mm-hmm. So it's really, it's a circumstantial claim, and people are adamant. They're like, no, they're black. And I'm just like, so this is the thing. Van Sertima could have interviewed the people in the region.
It would have been nice.
Ask them what their oral traditions say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he didn't. And we'll never know what he would have heard had he done that. But he should have. Like, I'm no hindsight's 2020. He should have done it. Mm-hmm. Right? He's publishing in 1976 at the end of the year. Well, the treatise on oral history as oral tradition as history came out in 1961. What are we talking about here? That's 15 years. That's a fourth of a scholar's productive time on earth if they live into the 70s or they live to be 80. That's a fourth of their productivity lifespan where he could have interacted with those ideas and then implemented them into his research. But we're back to being selective about what gets served to us as corroboration or not. Right. And this is the other thing. And Brother Garfield is on this, when he talks about Russell Merkin and, the creation of the Hebrew Bible, foundational to the social scientific method is no work can corroborate itself. I don't hear anybody talking about this in relationship to the Olmec heads. People are like, oh, they look black. Full stop. That work cannot corroborate itself.
Correct.
What else do you bring to the table? So we look for the material culture. We don't find any African cultural remains around the site. We don't find any African tools. We don't, now some things would have eroded over time. But when you smelt iron, let me back up. So I'm gonna go to Africa for a second. The African continent is like a shallow bowl. Like it moves upward from the coast, and then the middle of from the edge of the coast in, it's a shallow bowl. And meteorites have been striking the continent since forever. And these are iron-bearing space rocks. Right? These meteorites. So African smelters collect these rocks. They build a furnace out of clay, a giant clay egg. It could be 15 feet tall. It could be a giant cylinder. There's different morphologies and structures to these. And then they they heat the furnace up using bellows to force air through the porcelain tubes that we were talking about before we started this, video tonight. And then, it's just deep. And for all of that, when you are done producing a bloom of iron, so what happens is the rocks heat so hot, they split open, and the liquid molten iron in the middle and around it expresses out of the rocks and pulls into a bloom at the bottom of the furnace. It's a ball of iron, and it's molten, it's red hot. And so then the smelters pull this iron out of the fire, and then they can break pieces off of it and give it to smiths, who will then refine it into a finished product. Right? I just finished teaching a class. I'm going to go on a little tangent. I just finished teaching a class about Benin and Togo. And in pre-colonial Benin and Togo, there were so many iron workers that the archaeologists have just confirmed. It was already in Benin and Beninwa and Togolese oral history and oral traditions, but they were servicing 600,000 people with iron. They were exporting iron. They had thousands and thousands of furnaces, and they're in the heart of the rainforest, so the trees are replenishing very quickly because you need to cut down trees to make charcoal to work iron. And they're exporting this iron over Look, I don't know, I can't pull it up right now, but I have architecture. Let me get it right. An archaeological site plan for a village. It's a site called BAS, I think 276. Don't quote me. I think that's the right site. And it shows they had elaborate city structures, town village structures, and within those villages, it was a production line. Some of the people were smelters. Some of the people were refining iron for certain. You find certain types of tools in certain workshops, and they decrease in size as they become more fine-tuned, like small tools. But then you get calipers, and you get tongs, and you get hammers. These blacksmiths are like, so anyway, look, that blacksmithing is no joke. And when we talk about Mande history, the Mande speakers basically colonize the blacksmiths. Colonized from where Bamako is. There's an oblong area around Bamako all the way to the Atlantic seawall, right? And now, why is this important? When we do back to oral interviews in Van Sertima, when we do oral interviews with the people that live on the Atlantic coast of West Africa, and we ask them, the scholars ask them, where do your words for iron come from? They're like, the Mande speakers gave us those words. They also brought circumcision knives, and they circumcised our children, basically transforming them into adults through the rituals of initiation. All those are loan words from Bamana language, Mande languages, right? So what makes that powerful is like you only learn that by interviewing local people. And so Van Sertima really should have interviewed local people.
Would have helped them out.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Would have helped them out. Let me read these super chats. Big up for the support. I think you say the name Ampianki. Am I saying that right? Juju, did I say that right? Did I get it off right?
Yeah, it's Bianchi.
That's Bianchi. Yeah. What? He made it. Come on, Bianchi. 904. Dazali. Man, appreciate that support right there, man. That's love right there, man.
To Dazali.
All right. So we got about a couple more minutes left. We don't want to overdo it, right? Because we appreciate you, and you're going to be doing a few more shows with us, man. I tell you what, though, on them All-Mac kids, I heard you say, man, that's some lookership. I say, man, he kicking that pseudo-killer lingo, man. So you must have been peeping the shows and supporting us, man. I appreciate that lingo, man. It goes straight to the point. Also, we like to say a lot of that work was foolish shit. For sure. Yeah. I just like to get straight to it. But, we appreciate you. Appreciate your support, man. Appreciate just having an academic and just giving us an example of what you can do, right? As an African American, learning that language. It was a few things you talked about. You was like the first African American to learn a language. I believe you said that, right? You want to kind of talk about that a little bit? Those things you did
to learn, but what I did, I was the first person. Let me back up. So there's a fellowship program that I won when I was at IU in Bloomington. Okay. And it's called the Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowship. The first 2 years I applied, like you got to go through 3 levels of committees. You get interviewed like it's crazy, and you have to write a proposal. So I wrote a proposal because I knew I wanted to go to Mali. I needed to know Bamana in order to do my type of research project. I could have chosen French for my speaking language, but I would have never chosen that because I'd be speaking a colonizer's language, and I was not going to do that if I was going to do field work in West Africa. I wanted to speak the people's language, and this is the dominant language in Mali. 80% of the people speak Bamana. And so the first 2 years I applied, I won both of those. The third year, my mentor had returned to Mali, and there was no one in the United States. There was no Bamana language program anywhere in the U.S. So I asked the committee, could I take the money and study it in Mali at the National University. I'm the first person to win 3 back-to-back foreign language area studies fellowships, and I'm the first person to take one in Africa for study as opposed to studying in the United States. That's what I'm the first on. But there are people who studied African languages before me.
Right, of course that. But I just want to say, so that's why during the whole interview, I wanted to keep you on track because you have like a wealth of knowledge, man. We want to bring you back. We want to talk about the slave trade. We just want to pick your brain, man. We appreciate you pseudo killing, right? Because that's what you're doing. And no, he's not debating nobody. That's not what he do. But he got that damn pseudo killer army behind him, right? So you step up, you're gonna get beat down. Just letting you know, that's not his job. That's not his job. He in the backdrop. He in the background. He ain't in all the mess and all that. We're going to treat him like we treat all PhDs, right? With respect and honor that he deserves because he took the time. He went to the continent, right? He brought back real, authentic African history, not the African-American Egyptians, you know. You know what I'm saying? That's been living there for over 10 million years and made spaceships and ran around calling themselves black and all the nonsense. Now, he ain't talking about them, right? He ain't talking about the West Africans that was shameless and didn't do nothing. No, he talking about real African history. And that's why we appreciate you around here. Last couple questions, man. We don't want to disrespect your time. Mel, Sean, Juju, somebody.
Juju.
I don't know if I want to save it till next time. Go ahead, Sean. I'll do it after Sean.
No, say your question.
I had
we now ladies where I'm from, we can do both.
Ladies.
Let me see. I'll ask a simple one. I got like 20 of them. What's one myth about African history you wish would disappear?
Ooh, wow.
Oh man.
I mean, that Africans didn't have writing before European contact. That's easy. Like that's the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Easy answer. Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah. Okay, back to you, Sean. I got 30 questions, you know. I ain't all night.
You ain't got nothing, Mel?
Mel, you don't got nothing?
Yeah. I got a question. I was gonna write this one off, but I'll ask it. I feel like people tend to conflate African origin, African influence, and evidence that they were present in the area. As a historian, what's the criteria that you use to separate those claims?
Woo, man, you be dropping bomb questions, all of y'all. Look, so I would say that in the social science, in the social historical method, we always look locally before we look outside of the local frame, right? Because we don't want to deny the genius of local people. I'll just give an example. We were just talking about ironworking. For the longest time, European and white American scholars believed that African understanding of ironworking came from the Greeks. They assumed it crossed the Mediterranean and then it crossed the Sahara and then it ended up in West Africa. But then once scholars started actually doing full-length studies of blacksmiths on the continent, they realized just based on morphology, the structures in African furnaces do not match European furnaces. That's A. B, African furnaces were 10,000 to 20,000 degrees hotter than the hottest blast furnaces in Rome at the height of its technological development. They're not operating on the same level. Right. So we always look locally, and that's what was a problem with in many ways. I know I'm a hedger of some repute, but that's why the hyper diffusionism of Van Sertima, of Dr. Ben, like of some of these Afrocentric intellectuals is problematic because they don't look locally first. They're so busy imputing a foreign origin to something, and they haven't bothered to ask what the local people are doing. So So that's, I would say that's a differentiator, Grand Archivist Brother Mel. That's definitely a differentiator. Now, influence, this is all conversation about diffusionism, the way I'm reading your question.
Right.
Influence is important. Influence leaves evidence. This is the thing. Human beings are subject to physical laws. Everywhere we go, we leave evidence. Well, what's the evidence look like? If Africans are in a particular place, they leave baskets. Now, baskets might degrade because they're biodegradable, but pottery isn't. If you build a furnace, the impurities from smelting that iron leaves a slag heap. It looks like a puddle of pudding that's jet black, and it moves out across the land because it gets squirted out of these furnaces. We don't find any slag heaps anywhere in the Americas. If Africans would have been here, they would have had the same capability to prospect for iron on the surface of the earth and build furnaces. We don't find any evidence of that. Right. So influence is important, but it leaves traces. And it makes a lot of sense to have evidentiary backing for that. I'll go on a quick tangent. I probably shouldn't do it because y'all gonna get mad at me. But when you look, I know you're gonna cut me off in 3 seconds, brother. But you hear the Hebrew Israelites saying our ancestors moved after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem into North Africa, and then they crossed. Look at Brother Shaw, he died. They crossed the Sahara without camels, and they end up in West Africa just in time to get scooped up by the transatlantic slave trade. That's my short. That's my text message version of this mythology, right? And where's their trash? An archaeologist, that's called a midden. Where's the evidence of their habitation? How you gonna cross the Sahara? It's 1,200 miles from north to south, but once you add in all the huge sand dunes, and you don't travel through straight line of sight, so you talking about 1,500 miles. You gonna take children and pregnant women with you? Newsflash, that's gonna slow you down and take longer. How much water does a person need in the desert in a day? Right? And you don't have camels. Camels don't come into North Africa until the 3rd century CE. So you're talking about 100 and, I don't know, I can't count. 130 years or 230 years before the camels arrive. You can't cross the Sahara on foot with no camel. I remember I was in a clubhouse room one day and the Hebrew Israelites was popping off, and I just got the mic and I was like, yo, I just started asking them questions. I was like, the Hebrews were a literate culture. Why don't we find Hebrew characters all across West Africa? Where were their libraries? They had libraries. Right? I just start running it down. Sometimes you could dismantle an argument just by asking questions. They was hot. They was like, but this is all conjecture, right? I was like, some of your leaders should have told you. Better ask somebody. Like, why didn't anybody bother to ask these questions about this argument? How is it I'm asking these questions? I don't pat myself on the back like I'm super humble. But I was like, how come I'm asking these questions and y'all don't got no answers for none of this? You ain't never thought about it.
So them camels is important because you need some type of pack animal or something to carry the stuff, unless you just walking like this, which is really gonna kill you in the middle of the desert. But wouldn't that kind of kill that Egyptians gave rise to West African civilization thing there? Because we got a lot of people playing that card too. Like for me, I think that's egregious. I think that African culture can stand on its own based off their region. I think that the dang Egyptians never met the West Africans. I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I'm saying at a certain point, we got to knock this off, right? It's almost like the continent of Africa can't make it without Egypt. That's horrible for me.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Now, I'm going to complicate your statement for a fraction of a second.
For it.
So
Go for it.
Remember that in the Holocene wet phase, I'm using $10 words now, in the Aqualithic wet phase, when the Sahara is actually a giant inland sea and it's marshland, and we know that because of all the rock paintings that got elephants and hippopotami in the Sahara right now, right? So when that period existed, people did travel by boat across parts of the Sahara. So there are some, my view, there are some West Africans who likely spent time in the Nile Valley through those migrations over time. Now, the other piece, the flip side of that is there's 5 African language families. One of the language families is Nilo-Saharan. There are Nilo-Saharan speakers who live on the northern bend of the Niger River. How they get there? One of the greatest mysteries in African history. We don't know, but they're there, which means they came from the Nile Valley at some point and traveled west. And they speak a Nilo-Saharan language. That's how we know. Their language differs from all the people around them, but the group is small, but it's significant enough. So there's a lot of forward and backward migration. You hear Brother Ngozi talk about he'll make you go snowblind on haplogroups and subclades and all the numbers. And I love him to death. I love him to death. But like there's a lot we don't know. Yeah.
So is that speculative? Okay, what would you put it on a scale? I'm saying it's speculative. I don't think they have archaeology to kind of ground that in that. I think it's speculative.
It's speculative in some ways, but the language family being there, they're surrounded by Chadic speakers, people who don't speak an Afro-Asiatic language. So the problem is we know that some subpopulation of some significance moved into the Niger Valley, northern bend of the Niger Valley at some point. We don't exactly know how long ago, and we're going to need more genetic evidence from the people who live there so we can start using some of these other tools like modern computational linguistics to get a better handle on when the terms move.
All right, so where you putting it? Hey, Sekou, you definitely can get up here, man. Big up to Sekou Keller, man. Appreciate you, man. You one of the only people I let up here to go ahead and talk to the great doctor, man. So if you want to get up here, you can, Sekou. I respect you enough for that. All right, so we putting that. So you said again. You said where you put it at again? I want to hear it again. I want to get clarity. Put that at because then we got to see.
But the language part is not speculative. Those speakers are there.
Okay,
and we don't know how they got there. So their oral traditions say they came from the east. That's a whole separate. That's a whole separate kettle of fish because in West Africa, as Arabs and Muslims are crossing the Sahara, not through violence, but they're crossing as traders, we believe that the oral traditions in those regions south of the Sahara began to change. Some of those cultures began to claim, yeah, we came from the east too. Now, there's a value behind this called the invention of tradition. There's a couple scholars, Terrence Ranger and Eric Hobsbawm, wrote a book called The Invention of Tradition. It's got, a few criticisms in it, but the main argument holds. Like Homo sapiens sapiens try to invent and embellish our origin traditions. And it's not just in Africa, it's all over the world.
Of course.
The Chinese do it, but that's a form of legitimation, right? We try to legitimate ourselves in the present by stating our ancestors were ancient and they came from place X or Y or Z.
So that's like the Hebrews. That's like the Hebrews, right? They do it. That's like, these are all African Americans. They do it. We come from they do it. So then why wouldn't other people do it? The Africans on the continent are Homo sapiens sapiens too. So that's very interesting. So we're going to sit down because you're going to be teaching. We're going to sit down. We're going to go over that evidence because I let her read. I let her read. I like to see what you got on that. I like to break it because I know you got a hell of a library. Hell of a.
I do. I got about 4,000 volumes.
Yes, yeah, I'm saying. Yeah, I know you do. And you mentioned.
You're going to deal with that?
On what? On what?
The confusion between this guy in the chat, I think that's James, where he's saying you didn't have to cross the desert you didn't have to cross the Sahara in the desert. You could have went through the green belt. And I think that's where he's getting the timeline messed up.
No, you deal with it, Sean.
Well, yeah, but James, what you're conflating is two different things. You're trying to say that there was a green Sahara at the time that the green Sahara was gone away. Like, at what route or what point are you saying that they just would have crossed through a green belt? Like the Sahara either is green or is not.
Right. So I'll just say, like, the Green Sahara period runs from about 14,000 years before the present down to 5,000. Right. So, and the dates that we have for ancient Kemet, Egypt, are 3,400. Well, it depends, but say 3,300 BCE is a general benchmark date. A little before that. So, so there's a gap. And as the Sahara dries out, it triggers the Great Bantu Migration, which is a whole separate story we could talk about another time. But
yeah, we'll do that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, yeah, we'll focus on that we'll do a whole hour or two on that.
Yeah.
I want to keep you right there. Go ahead, though. Finish your point.
Yeah, I'm just saying that. Thanks for that. I'm just saying that the Sahara dries out. Well, African history is on such long time frames that it dries out pretty quickly. But for the people in the moment, it's drying out slowly. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of motion, right? Where because human beings need water to survive. So you can't migrate too far away from water. And then you got to manage your protein intake too. Because if you
you just said something significant, because that goes right back to the comment that he just made in the chat. You said you must have what again? Say that again.
Water and protein.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we have to have water and protein, that means that we should find water on the routes in particular areas, because they're not everywhere, right? So those people would have had to have knowledge. So crossing the Sahara, you would have needed to have a body of knowledge to know exactly where you needed to stop to hydrate and to get your protein to continue your path, either coming or going.
You're right. You know what? There's a massive underground aquifer across the Sahara, but it's deep. And that's where all the water went. Now, so some of the water that remained close enough to the surface because of geologic formations and the kind of the formation of it is not that hard to understand. Those become oases, right? Yes. And those oases still exist. But they're hundreds of miles into the Sahara. You can't get to them easily, and you have to know they're there to navigate to them. And the other piece is the Africans who are migrating south in the Great Bantu Migration, they're following the game. The game trails are all moving to the south, so they're following the game. Some of the game went north but you just don't find the same range of flora and fauna in North Africa that you do south of the Sahara. Now, there's another piece to it, which in the course I talk about in cutting across West Africa. Across the continent, there's a 1,000 millimeter rainfall line. Below that line is the rainforest zone in West Africa, but you also get the tsetse fly. So the tsetse fly eliminates cavalry-based kingdoms and empires in the rainforest zone because the tsetse fly has trypanosomiasis, African sleeping sickness, and it kills everything that's a pack animal, draft animal, horses. But north of that line is almost runs, I don't quote me, but Mali is a part of this zone. So that's the Sahel zone, where it's more desert, but there's still some greenery and there's still some water in the Sahel zone. It's not the Sahara. You get all the rise of kingdoms, the Kano kingdom. You get Kanem Bornu. You get Mali is a cavalry-based empire. The Susu Empire, Segu, all of these kingdoms, the Wolof Empire kingdoms, all those emerge north of the rainfall line. So they're not worried about the tsetse fly. So they actually domesticated. There's a specific type of horse in West Africa. It's called the barb horse. I just put it in the chat. BARB. It's a type of Arabian horse that came from the Arabian Peninsula into North Africa, and eventually it gets into sub-Saharan Africa. Now I'll say one more thing. There are 4 hard salt flats in a part of the Sahara that if you know where they are, you can walk for hundreds of miles. But then the salt flats dissolve, and you have to then navigate around these sand dunes. So you had to, part of what Sean, what you're saying is they needed a toolkit. Human beings developed toolkits for different environments, right? Especially in Africa. So in the pre-colonial period, you need a desert toolkit. When you're moving into a woodland area or a more water-rich area, you have to develop and adapt a new toolkit for that area, or you're not going to survive. So people would live on the borders between these areas. The area where they had a toolkit, they'd hang out there. And over hundreds of years, or maybe 1,000 years, people develop new supplementary toolkits that would let them go into the woodland area, let them go into the marsh area, let them go into the swamp area, etc. And that's, so it's really 2 steps forward, 1 step back, how that Bantu migration unfolded.
So I would like to add this. What I do know, I'm going to use this example. When the colonial powers came to settle the Americas, they almost died out. And the reason they almost died out, because they didn't understand the flora and the fauna. Food was right there at their feet. Lobsters, they near the Chesapeake Bay, turkey, wild turkey and all that. You would ask yourself, why did they almost starve? They used to cold weather, right? What happened? So I'm saying that if an Egyptian would have walked all the way to West Africa, they would have been faced with the same issues, the same problems, right? So I look at timelines, first of all, right? You talking West African civilizations, right? They time period is what, AD time periods when they was really flourishing like that? Do I have that correct?
2nd century for Ghana, and then basically from Ghana forward.
Okay, so
the Middle Ages.
Egyptians, you talking BC civilizations. So are we saying that Greek Egyptians walked it? See, at a certain point, man, it becomes borderline ridiculous for me. Totally, completely ridiculous to me, right? You talk about the Hyksos invasion, you talk about the Assyrians, you talk about the Persians, you talk about the Greeks, you talk about the Romans, you know what I'm saying? And we look at the time periods, right? By the time you get to the Greek and Roman periods, Pianki and them, you know what I mean? They lost against the Assyrians, right? Second time they come back, the mosquito. And I want to talk about the number one predator on planet Earth, the number one killer on planet Earth in 1 minute. But I'm saying they got bogged down with malaria. We know the story. They come back and defeat the Nubians. And at that point, man, that Egyptian empire is done up, right? And now you're in the hands of, I would say, people that colonized and brought in their custom and traditions, right? So why in the hell are the African Americans listen to wild white people that told the story first about some damn Northeast Africans needing to go to West Africa in the first place? Right. It doesn't make no sense. We know why Musa crossed, because he was going to Hajj. Makes sense.
Right. Yeah, right. But his was political though. His travels was political because he wanted to expand the empire, but at the same time, he also wanted to, there's other stories inside of that. He wanted forgiveness for some things that he had done as well.
Right, wilding out. But okay, but shoot. Let me read this. Let me see right here.
Well, while you were getting ready to read, I'll say real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I'm waiting on Sister Juju.
They back. You got to come in and do a thing on the Green Sahara, man. That's my favorite thing, the Green Sahara, right? Like all that Green Sahara from West Africa. The Green Sahara is in Egypt too.
He do love that.
You know what I'm saying? The green, I'm gonna say this again. The Sahara is in Egypt too, right? I've been showing it, the green of the Holocene. Man, I've been talking. It's an article. Last 20 years, Sean, right or wrong. I'm not trying to hear nobody coming from West. It doesn't even make. First of all, vast territory.
It is.
The Nile itself can stretch from New York City to California and halfway back again. Man, they playing with this thing, man. That's why I'm glad you're here, man. So y'all don't got no more. Y'all got finishing off questions because we cannot hold this doctor hostage.
You good? I'm here. I'm here for it.
I'm not even
trying to go 2 more hours, So.
I ain't listening to you. I'm gonna hold you back. I gotta hold you back. I gotta hold you back.
Yeah, I got a question. I wanted to ask the doctor something more friendly for people to learn. So I know you have the course and you're teaching people about the history, but outside of that course, what would you recommend for our best practice and our best interest in learning how to read a book like this and obtain the information that's in there and then be able to cross-reference it and know how to identify the miscues, etc. What would you suggest we use as tools to help us be better at comprehending a lot of the things that we're reading today?
I mean, here, hold on. I'm gonna put this in the chat for anybody who happens to be listening. But so the best volume, well, on African history, broad history, is Toyin Falola. He's a professor at University of Texas at Austin. He's an endowed chair in African history. He's Nigerian. He's edited Africa in 5 volumes. Not a joke. And all the scholars in it are continental Africans writing about Africa's past. Dope. Now they talk about methodology in that, and I mean, some of it you learn by doing. I mean, Sean, so like that's a great question. But in terms of, I'll just say point blank, get a JSTOR account. Like, online journal store publishes peer-reviewed academic work. You get a free account. You can read 100 journal articles a month for free. You can't download any of them. You got to be attached to a university to do that, or you got to have a different level of account. But the free account, I mean, I'm not teaching at a university right now, so I use a free account. I can read a ton. And just kind of put yourself on a schedule there. Just now, one of the things I do in the course, and I'll do a micro version of it right here, is that I teach people how to read the introductory chapters of books, scholarly monographs that are written on particular topics in African history, because they have a particular format. And it took me 2 years to crack the code on how to interpret what's contained in those opening chapters. But there's a literature review. You gotta get comfortable with literature reviews. A scholar writing about a topic, like my doctoral thesis, it only had to be 220 pages long, as 342 pages with 42 pages of footnotes, right? The opening chapter has 42 footnotes. And that's the literature review on what gives me the ability to talk relatively authoritatively about the subject I'm going to explore. And then every chapter after that has its own footnotes. But I would just say footnotes are the key breadcrumb for understanding arguments. Often a scholar will bury in a footnote why they're using or referencing a particular source. So there's a whole like dialogics or methodology on source analysis. That's huge. I would also say, I mean, there's a number of books. I don't just want to put it down. There's a few books that I discuss in the course. One is, I'm just going to put these in the chat. V.Y. Mudimbe is a very important figure. He wrote The Invention of Africa. That's Indiana University Press. That was the press I worked for. His book is very important. There's a scholar named Mary Louise Pratt, and she's really dope. She wrote a book called Imperial Eyes, and the subtitle is Travel Writing and Transculturation. Hopefully I spelled that right. Yeah, probably. I got close. Maybe somebody can edit that, because I don't think I can edit it. Yeah, I can't. But these books are about the methodologies that are used to interrogate sources, especially sources written by Europeans in the colonial period. I mentioned this in some of the other interviews I've done, that some people say, oh, well, white people wrote that in the colonial period. It must not have any good evidence in it. Let's throw it out. Now, I'll just tell you. So there's a couple scholars that I read These were there. I call them scholars, but really they were European ethnographers. There's one. There was a French figure in French Sudan, so French West Africa, basically. His name was Maurice Delafosse. He was an ethnographer. He wasn't a formally trained anthropologist yet, because that didn't kind of really exist or was just beginning to emerge in the United States. But he studied Mande cultures so he could help the French better brutalize and colonize African people, right? And this is what early ethnographers did. They were working in the service of white supremacy and the service of the colonial project. So their findings were used to better understand African societies. But of course, like this stuff they got wrong, and they didn't always speak local languages, or they didn't believe they should learn them because it was beneath them. But here's the thing. Maurice Delafosse wrote stuff that when you go interview, well, it happened later in the 70s after independence, scholars began asking people in Mali, is this a social practice that's in your culture? And the Mande people would say, yeah, that's a social practice. It's old. And they could talk about it with a considerable level of depth, right? So just because it's a European colonial source doesn't mean you can't use it. You have to learn how to read it effectively. And that's a skill set like close textual analysis. You need to learn all the foreign language, like the Bomina terms or foreign language terms in it that are being referred to. That's all evidence you can then go ask other people about. And so the corroboration piece from oral history is huge. But you got to get good at learning how to read those documents. And as an academic, like for me, I had to learn to read French and speak some French, but read French because I was in the Malian archives. Everything in there is in French. I read longhand letters from French lieutenants in the French colonial army that were jigsaw puzzles letters. They had fallen apart because they were written on acetate-based paper, and I had to put them back together with tweezers and then figure out how to read them longhand. And I wasn't that good at French. I had just learned. My research assistant, a good dear friend of mine, Omar Traore, like he's a Malian. He read those because he's a native French speaker, right? Because he grew up in Mali. So we read those together, and the interpretation is really deep. So like, you know, but for everyday people who might never get to an archive in Mali, then learning how to read these documents is important. So I'd say the Toyin Folola, that's fire, essential reading. And there's others I could
is
give
this
you.
the guy right here that produced that textbook 5-volume set? Do I got this right?
That's him.
Yeah, so just letting y'all know, that is legitimate right there. All right, just for the record. Also, you can find it right here on Britannica. Right, they ain't putting trash on Britannica. All right, so that's dope, and it's a 5-volume scholarly work, just for the record. But it's an academic textbook.
Yep.
Okay. All right, that's important. It's an academic textbook and also scholarly, no pseudo history. Is it peer review articles? No, right? So you just collaborate it, right? But you know what a textbook is. We always say when something's in the textbook, yo, that's a great book to have right there, textbook. So
well, I will tell you, the textbooks are peer reviewed though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's of course.
When they come out, they get reviewed. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was letting the people know that that's a dope thing right there for African. Start there. You ain't gonna have the spaceships flying through the air and the nonsense, man. That, like he said, that's an indigenous African, and I'm glad that they can participate, right, in writing their history. And African Americans ain't the ones doing it because we'll mess it up over here. We got the feel good Valentines and all that. We gonna mess it up. So it's good.
African Americans writing though.
Yeah, it is. But it's a joke. It's a joke.
I feel you. I was gonna say don't hate on the mothership. Like don't hate on. I'm getting on the mothership as soon as we get out of here.
Hey, let me give y'all a quote. It says, "If you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you." That's a Wolof proverb.
Dang, I never heard that. I'm remembering that. The one I reference is if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So that's big up to you, man, brother Sean. That's dope. That's dope. I gotta write that down. The end will not trouble you.
Hey, look, we up against it, man. We appreciate everybody that came through the interview. We're gonna have lots more coming from the brother, man. He on the road, man. A lot of information packed in this interview. I tried to keep it as close as possible because he got so much, man. You gotta box him in, right? I love his African storytelling ability, African American style. I love that with your work and the way you transmit ideas, man. That class is gonna be dope for everybody to do it. It's just dope to have a person because for me, I don't give a damn what color you are, right? Because I recognize I ain't looking at your color. I'm looking at the quality of the words that's coming out your mouth and the quality of the work you produce so I don't get tricked by the color of your skin because that's a trick these days. For our generation, they trick you with the color, right? So for me, I don't care about that. I'm judging you based off the quality of your work and your speech, and I can tell how well read you are. Right? I can tell your range of subject matter. Right? One last thing. What's the number one predator on planet Earth?
Mosquito.
Ha!
Period. Anopheles gambii and the 80s Egypti mosquitoes have killed billions of people.
They act like that. They act like they didn't just go through like the whole West Nile situation.
Like, come on now, say it,
man. That's crazy. And I think Africans had something that kind of protect them from that, didn't they?
Yeah, Duffy negative is one. Yeah, but also, sure, sickle cell. That's the more well-known ones, but G6PD deficiency, hemoglobin C, hemoglobin E. Like, come on, we could talk about that.
Yeah, that's another story. I just wanted to hear you kick it a little bit. I just wanted to hear you kick that a little bit because I know you had the kick behind it. I just wanted to hear you kick it a little bit. Anyway, man, we listen. We appreciate you, bro. And for those that need somebody to look like them to get it right, then here you go. See how serious his range was. He qualified. I'm letting y'all YouTubers know right now, yo, he ain't debating. He don't debate his equals. He just teaching us. We appreciate your status in the community teacher, man. And we appreciate your willingness, right, to come down with the people, man. We definitely appreciate that. And we full support, man. I know you'll support our owls. We talked about it, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, we're in the trenches, man. We like in Vietnam, they had specific soldiers, Marines that were going to the tunnels. We're in the tunnels. We flushing them out. And when they come on the surface, yo, that's where you teach them. That's where we at in this conversation, man. So look, man, y'all know what it is, man. It's the Pseudo Killers, man. We doing our thing, man. We keeping it real serious right here, man. Community skeptics, man. We riding hard, man. Like and subscribe to the channels, man. And you know what, man? This was the best interview out of all my interviews. Appreciate you, man. To get some of that home cooking is serious, man. Look, man, I'm your host, Bobby Banger. Juju, what you got to say on the way out the door? What you got? What you got?
Oh, man, I ain't memorize it, though. But I just want to say thanks for everybody's supporting. This was a great expert interview. Dr. John is that guy, you know.
That dude.
Been that guy for a long time. So
long time mixing with y'all on Clubhouse and all that. Rob Bourne.
Yeah, Rob Bourne should have been here. I just need y'all to go ahead and support that course. You know, everybody need to get on a level. It's time for everybody to get on a level. Stop playing.
Yeah, we're gonna get them on the level. Sean P.
Huh?
Sean P.
Yeah, man, I appreciate y'all having me, Doctor. I'm glad to be a part of the conversation with you. Look forward to more information, man. Make sure y'all like, share, subscribe to both of the channels, Community of Skeptics and Pseudo Killers, and come on, I know where we at.
Hey, Grand Archivist. Oh, man, you be making up names, man. You switching them up on me now.
Yo, I enjoyed this one. appreciate having Dr. John on, Sean P. Looking forward to the next episode with Dr. John on the pseudo.
That was dope, man. Go ahead, Doc. If you got one thing to say to us, what would you say?
I would say, you all can become Beton Coulibaly too. That's what we started on. It's okay to take the elders and the ancestors' knowledge and iterate on it and just grow. Otherwise, we risk being left behind. The technology and the science stuff that's emerged, it's hardcore. Yeah. And there's a lot of it that many of us are not familiar with. But we need to find a way to grow and learn that. So, yeah. And I just peace to the chat. Peace to the chat. I appreciate y'all.
Hey, man, y'all heard him, man. So we checking the checkers, man. And we got the PhDs behind us, man. With that, man, we out.
Stay literate. Lack of knowledge, it's a deficit, why don't you get with it? Can you get with it? Monumental test without it, why not get with it? Niggas get having fits, it never a quick fix. Trick doing tricks for preaching in the pulpit. The religious think science be a trick, but it's a religious trick. Pull out the blick, pray to Jesus, but still selling bricks. You still don't get it, you're still with it. Now you're in deficit, so what can science fix?
Can't fix your ignorance, your constant belligerence keeps y'all in a trick. In a trick. That shit's continue, stay at cap. You stay at cap.
What we do with that? We teach the teachers teach. Call cap on the preacher. If this was knowledge, you're in the bleachers. The pseudo slip produce magic tricks. Back to not reaching you. We the teachers teach. Calling cap on the preacher. The grifter grifting. Where there's a grift, there's no lifting. The tide is shifting. We practice then we uplift it. It's a polished gift. So what can science fix?
Science can't fix your ignorance, your constant belligerence keeps y'all in a trick.
Still in a trick.
Still in a trick. That shit's continue. You stay at cap. You stay at cap.
No time for the grift. We kill them pseudo. No, that's lift. Shit stay lit. We never quit. Not one bit. The literacy's lit. Killing them with the science shit. Teachers, teacher. Call cap on a peach. Stay, literate, steam.
Man, I'm your host, Bobby Banger, man. You listen to the Pseudo Killers and the Community Skeptics, man. Had that powerful interview with the expert, man. We adding you to the catalog of experts, man. And with that, we out.